The moment Maddie Reed slipped her hand from her father's grip and walked toward the crying homeless woman on that frozen bus stop bench, three shattered lives began their collision course toward healing. What started as one little girl's instinct to comfort a stranger would unravel secrets of devastating loss, test the boundaries of trust, and prove that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone in when every fiber of our being screams to stay alone. This is their story. One hug, one choice, one family built from broken pieces. Stay with me until the very end of this journey, and please comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The February morning bit cold and sharp through downtown Portland, the kind of cold that makes you question why anyone lives in the Pacific Northwest by choice. Jacob Reed pulled his daughter's pink knit hat lower over her ears as they walked, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. Saturday morning, farmers' market day, their ritual. "Daddy, can we get the apple cider donuts again?" Maddie asked, her 7-year-old voice bright despite the temperature. "The ones with the sugar?" "We'll see, Bug," Jacob said, though they both knew that meant yes. He'd say yes to just about anything that made his daughter smile these days. Ever since the divorce 18 months ago, every genuine laugh from Maddie felt like a small miracle, something to be protected and preserved. They were 3 blocks from the market when Jacob saw her. At first, she was just another person at the bus stop, someone huddled against the cold, waiting for the 47 line that ran every 20 minutes on weekends. But as they got closer, Jacob realized she wasn't waiting for anything. She was curled on the bench in a position that spoke of defeat, her thin jacket inadequate for the weather, her shoulders shaking in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. She was crying. Not the loud, attention-seeking kind of crying, the silent kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that happens when someone has been crying so long that sound no longer serves any purpose. "Come on, Maddie," Jacob said quietly, angling their path to give the woman privacy. "Let's cross here." But Maddie had already seen her, had already stopped walking. Her small hand slipped from Jacob's grip before he could tighten his fingers. "Maddie." His daughter was already moving toward the bench, her pink backpack bouncing with each determined step. Jacob's heart lurched. He knew his daughter's tender heart, knew her instinct to fix and help and heal. But this was different. This was a stranger, an adult, someone whose story they didn't know, whose stability they couldn't gauge, whose— "Excuse me," Maddie said softly, standing directly in front of the woman on the bench. The woman's head jerked up, tears streaking her face, eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. She couldn't have been more than 25, maybe 30 at most. Dark hair hung in tangled waves around a face that might have been beautiful if it wasn't so hollow with grief. Her clothes were clean but worn, layered against the cold. 2 sweaters, a thin jacket, jeans with a hole at one knee. I'm sorry," the woman stammered, quickly wiping at her face. "I didn't mean to—" "I think you need a hug," Maddie interrupted gently. "Can I hug you?" The woman froze. Her hand stopped mid-wipe, suspended in the air between her face and her lap. For a long moment, she simply stared at this small child in the pink hat and purple jacket, at the open expression of pure compassion that only children seem capable of offering without condition or calculation. Jacob reached them, his hand landing on Maddie's shoulder. "Maddie, honey, you can't just—" "Please?" Maddie asked again, looking up at the woman with those enormous brown eyes that Jacob had never been able to say no to. "My teacher says hugs help when people are sad." "Are you sad?" The woman's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she nodded. Once. Barely perceptible. "Okay," Maddie said simply, and stepped forward. Jacob watched his daughter wrap her small arms around this stranger's shoulders, watched the woman's entire body go rigid with shock, then slowly soften. The woman's arms came up hesitantly, uncertainly, and encircled Maddie's small frame. A sob broke from her throat, raw and broken, and full of something that sounded like years of pain compacted into a single sound. "It's okay," Maddie whispered, patting the woman's back the way Jacob patted hers during nightmares. "It's okay to be sad sometimes." The embrace lasted perhaps 30 seconds. To Jacob, standing there with his hand extended awkwardly, ready to pull his daughter back if needed. It felt like 30 minutes. People walked past, some glancing over with curiosity or judgment, most simply hurrying toward their Saturday morning destinations with carefully averted eyes. When Maddie finally stepped back, the woman was staring at her with an expression Jacob couldn't quite name. Wonder, maybe. Disbelief. Something fragile and new, like someone seeing sunlight after months in darkness. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice hoarse. "You have no idea." "Thank you." Maddie smiled her gap-toothed smile. "What's your name?" "Maddie," Jacob said carefully. "Maybe we should—" "Lila," the woman said quietly, looking at Maddie rather than Jacob. "My name is Lila Hart." "I'm Maddie. Maddie Reed. This is my daddy, Jacob." She turned to look up at him. "Daddy?" Lila was really sad. Did something bad happen? Jacob opened his mouth, searching for the polite extraction, the gentle way to explain boundaries to his daughter while not making this woman feel judged or dismissed. But before he could speak, Lila was talking, her words spilling out in a rush like water through a broken dam. "My mom died," she said, and then looked surprised that she'd spoken at all. 8 months ago. I was just looking at her picture." She held up a worn photograph, edges soft from handling, a smiling woman with Lila's eyes standing beside a younger, happier version of the woman on the bench. "Today's her birthday." Would have been her birthday. She would have been 56. Maddie's eyes welled up. "I'm sorry. I miss my mama too sometimes, but she just lives across town. Missing someone who died must be really, really hard." Something in Jacob's chest twisted. He thought of his ex-wife, of the custody arrangement that meant he only had Maddie every other week, of how his daughter's biggest sorrow was a different kind of loss, but loss nonetheless. "It is hard," Lila said, her voice steadier now, as if speaking to a child required a composure she couldn't quite manage for the adult world. "Very hard." "Are you going somewhere?" Maddie asked, gesturing to the bus stop. "The bus should come soon. The 47 is usually pretty on time on Saturdays." Lila's laugh was bitter and broken. "No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just sitting." "Oh." Maddie processed this, her forehead crinkling in concentration. Then her face cleared with understanding far beyond her years. "You don't have anywhere to go." It wasn't a question. Lila's face flushed red, embarrassment flooding her features. She looked away quickly toward the street, anywhere but at this observant child or her father standing witness to this humiliation. "Maddie, that's not— we can't ask—" Jacob started, but his daughter was already talking. "Are you hungry? We were going to the farmer's market to get donuts. The apple cider ones with sugar. Daddy always gets me one, but I bet he'd get you one too." "Right, Daddy?" Jacob found himself pinned by 2 sets of eyes, his daughter's pleading brown ones and Lila's shocked gray ones. The woman looked terrified and hopeful in equal measure, like someone who'd been offered water in the desert but couldn't quite believe it was real. Every logical part of Jacob's brain was screaming caution. "You don't know this woman. You don't know her story. You have a daughter to protect, a child whose safety comes before charitable impulses, before compassion, before—" "Of course," he heard himself say. "If you'd like to join us, you're welcome." The words hung in the cold air between them. Lila stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language, like the sounds he'd made couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. She started, then stopped. "I don't want to intrude. You don't know me. I'm not looking for handouts. It's not a handout," Jacob said, and meant it. "It's breakfast with another human being on a cold Saturday morning. That's all." Maddie grabbed Lila's hand with the casual confidence only children possess. "Come on, if we don't hurry, they run out of the good ones, and you should have a good one. It's your mom's birthday." Lila looked down at the small hand holding hers, pink mittens, already slightly damp from the morning cold. Something in her expression shifted, cracked, broke open. She nodded once, then stood on unsteady legs, folding the photograph carefully before tucking it into her jacket pocket, right over her heart. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Thank you." They walked the 3 blocks to the farmer's market in a strange little configuration, Maddie in the middle, holding both Lila's hand and Jacob's, chattering away about the market vendors, her favorite stalls, the man who sold honey and always let her taste 5 different kinds before choosing. Jacob watched Lila from the corner of his eye, cataloging details he tried to tell himself weren't his business to notice. The way she kept her free hand clutched in her pocket, probably holding that photograph. The way she flinched when a car backfired 2 streets over. The way her eyes tracked every doorway, every alley, with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned to assess every space for safety and shelter. The way her stomach audibly growled when they turned the corner and the smell of baked goods hit the cold morning air. The Portland Saturday market sprawled across 3 blocks of closed streets, white tents and colorful stalls creating a maze of local produce, crafts, and food. Even in February, even in the cold, it bustled with weekend shoppers and vendors who'd been setting up since before dawn. There! Maddie pointed to a tent near the entrance, where steam rose from trays of fresh donuts. That's Maria's stand. She makes the best ones. They joined the short line. Jacob pulled out his wallet, counting bills. He'd brought $40, budgeted for a dozen eggs, some fresh bread, maybe a bag of apples if they weren't too expensive. The donuts were a splurge he always allowed. "What can I get you folks?" Maria, a round woman in her 60s with flour dusting her apron, beamed at them from behind the counter. 3 apple cider donuts, please," Jacob said, "and 3 coffees, 2 regular, 1—" He looked at Lila questioningly. "Black is fine," she said quickly. "Just black." "Thank you." "And can she have 2 donuts?" Maddie asked, looking up at her father. "Since it's a special day?" Maria's eyebrows rose slightly, but she said nothing, already reaching for a paper bag. "Of course," Jacob said, even as he mentally recalculated his budget. That was fine. They could skip the eggs this week. Cereal was fine. "Make it 4, please." "You don't have to," Lila started, but Jacob cut her off gently. "I want to." They found a bench near the edge of the market, away from the main flow of traffic. The wooden slats were cold through Jacob's jeans, but the coffee was hot, and the donuts were still warm from the fryer, sugar crystals melting slightly against his fingertips. Maddie tore into hers with gusto, sugar coating her upper lip. Lila held hers carefully, staring at it like it might disappear if she blinked. "It's okay," Maddie said through a mouthful, talking before swallowing despite Jacob's countless reminders about manners. "You can eat it. That's what it's for." Lila took a small bite, then another, then a larger one. Jacob watched her eyes close briefly, watched something like relief wash over her features. When had she last eaten? Yesterday? The day before? "These are incredible," Lila said softly. "Thank you. Really. You didn't have to do this." "Maddie didn't give me much choice," Jacob said with a half smile, bumping his shoulder against his daughter's. "She's pretty insistent when she decides someone needs help." "I get that from you," Maddie said matter-of-factly. "You always help people, like when Mr. Peterson's car broke down and you spent all day fixing it, or when Mrs. Chen needed someone to shovel her driveway and you did it even though your back hurt." Jacob felt his face warm. "That's just being a decent neighbor, Bug." "See?" Maddie turned to Lila triumphantly. "He helps people. It's what we do." Lila was quiet for a moment, studying them both. When she spoke again, her voice was different, more guarded but also more present, like she was choosing to be here rather than simply enduring it. "You asked earlier if something bad happened," she said, looking at Maddie. "A lot of bad things happened, but maybe one good thing is happening right now." "What bad things?" Maddie asked with the bluntness only children can pull off without offense. "Maddie," Jacob warned gently. "It's okay," Lila said, surprising them both. I think maybe I need to say it out loud. I've been carrying it alone for so long." She took a breath, let it out slowly. "My mom got sick 2 years ago, cancer. The treatment was expensive, so expensive. Even with insurance, the bills just kept coming. I used everything I had, everything we had. I thought it would be okay, you know. I thought she'd get better, and we'd rebuild." She paused, taking a sip of coffee, wrapping both hands around the cup like it was the only warm thing in the world. "She died last June." and suddenly I was alone with all these bills and this grief that made it hard to breathe, hard to think. I couldn't focus at work. I was a teacher's aide at an elementary school, and I started making mistakes, forgetting things, coming in late because I couldn't sleep at night, but then couldn't wake up in the morning. They were patient for a while, but eventually, she shrugged. Eventually, I lost the job. Maddie had stopped eating, her donut forgotten in her lap, her full attention on Lila's face. Lost the job, lost the apartment, couldn't pay rent with no income. I stayed with a friend for a few weeks, but she had her own struggles, her own small space. I tried the shelters, but they're full, always full. So many people need help. Her laugh was hollow. I've been staying wherever I can. Doorways, the library during the day when it's open, sometimes the 24-hour diner if I can nurse a single coffee long enough. Last night I slept at the bus station. That's not safe, Maddie said, her voice small. No, Lila agreed. It's not, but it's what I have right now. Jacob felt something painful expanding in his chest. Pity, yes, but also recognition. He thought about how close he'd come to financial disaster during the divorce, how the legal fees and the splitting of assets had nearly destroyed him. He'd kept the house, but barely. Had kept his job as a contractor, but only because he was good at it and people kept calling. How many missed calls? How many lost clients? How many bad months would it have taken for him to be sitting on this bench telling a similar story? Not many. The answer was not many at all. "Where's your family?" he asked. "Your dad? Other relatives?" Lila shook her head. "Dad left when I was 8, never looked back. Mom's parents died when I was in high school. No siblings, no cousins that I know how to reach, even if I wanted to." She looked down at her hands. "It was always just me and Mom. And now it's just me." The words hung heavy in the cold air. Around them, the market buzzed with Saturday morning life, people laughing, vendors calling out their wares, children squealing as they ran between stalls. The normalcy of it all felt obscene next to Lila's quiet devastation. "I'm sorry," Jacob said, knowing the words were inadequate, but not knowing what else to offer. "That's incredibly hard. The worst part is," Lila stopped, swallowed hard. "The worst part is how fast you become invisible. People look right through you, or worse, they look at you with fear or disgust or pity. That woman at the bus stop? That's not who I am. That's not who I ever thought I'd be. I have a degree. I worked with kids. I had dreams and plans and a future, and then suddenly," she gestured helplessly. "Suddenly, I'm that person everyone crosses the street to avoid." "I didn't avoid you," Maddie said fiercely, "and I'm not afraid of you." Lila's eyes filled with tears again. No, you didn't. You saw me. Really saw me. Do you know how rare that is?" "Why don't grown-ups see people?" Maddie asked, looking between Lila and her father. "Daddy, why don't grown-ups see people like kids do?" Jacob had no answer for that. Or rather, he had too many answers, none of them good. Fear, self-protection, the desperate need to believe that bad things only happen to people who somehow deserve them, because if bad things can happen to good people, then none of us are safe. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "grown-ups are scared of things they don't understand, or things that remind them how quickly everything can fall apart." "That's dumb," Maddie declared. "Lila's nice. She's just having a really, really bad time. Like when I'm sad and you tell me it won't last forever. That bad times end." "Do they?" Lila asked softly, and for a moment she wasn't talking to Maddie at all. The question sat there, unanswered, while they finished their donuts and coffee. The sugar and caffeine helped. Jacob could see Lila sitting straighter, some color returning to her pale cheeks. Small things. Basic human needs met in small, inadequate ways. "Can Lila come shopping with us?" Maddie asked, wiping sugar from her face with the back of her hand. "She can help me pick out apples. I'm good at apples." Jacob hesitated. He'd already bought breakfast. Inviting this woman to spend the morning with them felt like crossing another line, stepping further into something he couldn't quite name. Responsibility, maybe. Involvement. The kind of commitment that couldn't be easily taken back. But Lila was looking at Maddie with such naked hope, such desperate longing for normal human connection, that saying no felt cruel in a way Jacob couldn't stomach. If Lila wants to, he said carefully, giving her an out. But she might have other things she needs to do. I don't, Lila said quickly. Too quickly. Then, more measured. I mean, if I wouldn't be in the way, I don't want to impose more than I already have. You're not imposing, Maddie said firmly, taking Lila's hand again. You're coming shopping, and maybe we can find something good for dinner. What do you like for dinner? The simple domesticity of the question, what do you like for dinner, seemed to hit Lila like a physical blow. Her face did something complicated, cycling through emotions too fast to name. I used to like... She stopped, started again. My mom made this amazing chicken soup every Sunday. I haven't had it since... Her voice broke. I haven't had it in almost a year. Daddy makes good soup, Maddie offered. Not as good as Grandma's, but pretty good. Right, Daddy? Adequate soup, Jacob agreed with a small smile. Occasionally approaching good. They wandered through the market, Maddie leading the way, Lila and Jacob following. It should have been awkward. This strange configuration of people, this makeshift connection built on nothing but a child's compassion and a father's inability to say no. But somehow it wasn't. Lila talked as they walked, slowly at first, then with increasing ease. She told them about her mom, a librarian, fierce and funny and endlessly patient, about growing up in Portland, about her degree in education, about the classroom she'd hoped to have one day, full of kids like Maddie who saw the world with open hearts. Maddie told Lila about her school, her teacher Mrs. Rodriguez, her best friend Emma who was away visiting her grandmother, about her mom's new apartment across town, about the awkwardness of 2 homes, 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of everything except the things that really mattered. Jacob mostly listened, interjecting here and there, watching these 2 wounded souls find comfort in each other's company. He bought eggs and bread, apples, and a small container of honey. Lila insisted on carrying the bags, refused to let Maddie hold anything heavier than the single apple they'd let her pick out and eat while they walked. You've done too much already, Lila said when Jacob tried to take the bags back. Let me do this, please. It was almost noon when they completed the circuit of the market, ending back near Maria's donut stand. The temperature had risen slightly, now merely cold instead of bitter, and pale sunlight filtered through the clouds. Well, Jacob said, feeling the weight of goodbye settling over them, I guess we should... Daddy, Maddie interrupted, her voice small but determined. Lila doesn't have anywhere to go. Maddie, we can't, he started, but his daughter kept talking. She doesn't have anywhere safe. She said so, and it's going to be cold tonight, really cold. The weatherman said maybe snow. She looked up at him with those eyes that saw too much, that understood too much. We have the extra room, above the garage. The one you keep saying you should rent out but never do. Jacob's heart stopped. The studio apartment above the garage, unfinished, barely heated, but weatherproof at least, with a bed, a small bathroom, a hot plate, and mini fridge. He'd converted it last year thinking he'd rent it out for extra income, but had never actually listed it. Too much hassle, he'd told himself. Too much risk letting a stranger onto his property. But now his 7-year-old daughter was looking at him like he held someone's life in his hands, and Lila was very carefully not looking at anyone at all, her face burning with embarrassment. That's very kind, honey, but what? Maddie pressed. You always say we should help people when we can. You say that all the time. Can't we help Lila? It's not that simple, Jacob said, even as his mind raced through logistics. Background check. References. What did he even know about this woman except the story she'd told them? There are practical considerations, safety issues. I understand, Lila said quietly, cutting him off. Of course. You've already been more kind than anyone has been in months. I don't expect... I would never ask. She was backing away slowly, clutching the grocery bags like a shield. Thank you for breakfast, for letting me walk with you. It meant more than you know. She set the bags down carefully and turned to go. Wait, Jacob heard himself say. Lila stopped but didn't turn around. Jacob's mind was screaming at him. Bad idea. Terrible idea. You have a daughter to think about. You can't just invite a homeless stranger into your life, into your home, into your space. But he was also thinking about that photograph clutched over her heart, about the degree in education, about the way she'd talked to Maddie with genuine interest and kindness, about how sometimes the only difference between the people helping and the people needing help was luck and timing and a few bad months. "The studio apartment," he said slowly. "It's not much. Needs work. But it's warm, and it's dry, and it's safe." Lila turned around, her expression guarded, afraid to hope. "I can't afford rent," she said bluntly. "I have nothing, literally nothing. $27 in my pocket, and that's every dollar I have in the world." "I'm not asking for rent," Jacob said, the plan forming even as he spoke. "I'm asking for help. I work construction, long hours, irregular schedule. Maddie's with me every other week, but even when she's here, I'm often gone before she wakes up, home after she should be asleep. She goes to after-school care that costs a fortune, and she hates every minute of it. My mom tries to help, but she's 2 hours away. I need someone reliable, someone good with kids, someone you met 3 hours ago?" Lila finished, her tone careful but not unkind. "Someone my daughter saw when everyone else looked away," Jacob countered. "Someone who clearly loves kids, who has education training, who needs a safe place and maybe a chance to get back on her feet." He took a breath. "I need childcare and light housework. Picking Maddie up from school, helping with homework, maybe some cooking and cleaning. In exchange, you get the studio apartment, utilities included. No rent. It's not charity. It's a fair trade." The silence stretched out between them, heavy with possibility and risk. "You don't know me," Lila said finally. "You don't know if I'm trustworthy, if I'm stable, if I'm—" "Bring me references," Jacob interrupted. "From your last job, from your mom's friends, from anyone who knew you before. Let me do a background check. But if those come back clean, if you're willing to be honest and reliable and actually show up," he shrugged, "then maybe we can help each other." "Why?" Lila asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" Jacob looked down at his daughter, at the hope shining in her eyes, at the certainty that they were doing the right thing even when all logic suggested otherwise. "Because Maddie's right," he said simply. "We help people when we can, and right now, I can." Lila stood there, grocery bags at her feet, tears streaming down her face in broad daylight in the middle of the farmer's market, while people flowed around them like water around stones. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, yes. Thank you. I'll bring references. I'll do whatever background check you want. I'll show up. I promise I'll show up." "There's a library 2 blocks north," Jacob said. "The main branch. Meet me there tomorrow morning at 10. Bring whatever documentation you have, whatever proof you can manage. And Lila?" He waited until she met his eyes. "Don't make me regret this." "I won't," she said fiercely. "I swear I won't." They parted ways at the edge of the market, Jacob and Maddie heading toward their car, Lila walking in the opposite direction toward whatever shelter or doorway she'd call home one last night. "Daddy," Maddie said as they loaded groceries into the trunk, "did we just do something really good or really stupid?" Jacob laughed despite himself. "Honestly, Bug, I have no idea. Maybe both." "I think it's really good," Maddie said confidently. "Lila's nice, and she needs us. And maybe we need her too." "Maybe we do," Jacob agreed quietly, pulling his daughter into a hug against the cold. That night, after Maddie was asleep, Jacob sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, second-guessing every decision he'd made that day. He didn't know Lila Hart, didn't know her history, her struggles, whether the story she'd told was completely true or carefully edited to garner sympathy. He was potentially inviting chaos into their carefully reconstructed life, into the fragile stability he'd built for his daughter after the divorce had torn everything apart. But he kept coming back to that moment at the bus stop, the way Lila had frozen when Maddie asked for a hug, the way she'd held his daughter like someone remembering what human warmth felt like. The genuine grief in her voice when she talked about her mother, the education in her speech patterns, the carefulness in how she'd handled Maddie's questions. And he thought about Maddie, about raising a daughter who saw people, who offered help without calculation, who believed the world could be good if people just chose goodness. What kind of father would he be if he taught her compassion with limits, kindness with caveats? The next morning, Jacob arrived at the library at 9:45, 15 minutes early. He'd barely slept, had run through 1,000 scenarios where this went wrong, where Lila never showed up and turned out to be someone other than who she'd presented yesterday. At 9:55, he started to think she wasn't coming. At 9:58, he'd almost convinced himself this was for the best. At 10 o'clock exactly, Lila walked through the library doors. She'd cleaned up as best she could, hair washed somehow, pulled back in a neat braid, the same clothes but noticeably cleaner. She carried a folder pressed against her chest like a talisman. "Hi," she said, slightly breathless. "I'm here. I'm sorry. I was here at 9:30, but I didn't want to seem too eager or desperate, so I waited outside until exactly 10 and—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "I'm here." "I can see that," Jacob said, gesturing to a table in the quiet corner. "Let's talk." They sat across from each other, and Lila opened the folder with shaking hands. "I know it's not much," she said, laying out papers, "but it's everything I could manage. Reference letter from my last employer, the school principal. She wrote it before I left, said I was welcome to use her as a reference, even though they had to let me go. Letter from my mom's oncologist confirming the treatment timeline, the expenses. Pay stubs from my last 3 months of work showing I had stable employment. My college transcripts. My teaching certificate. I never completed the full certification, but I have the basics." Jacob looked through the papers carefully. Everything matched what she'd told them. The reference letter was glowing. Responsible, compassionate, excellent with children, deeply mourning, but trying her best. The medical documents confirmed the financial devastation of cancer treatment, even with insurance. The transcripts showed a solid GPA, education major, someone who'd clearly cared about learning. "I also wrote down 3 people you can call," Lila continued, pulling out another piece of paper. "My mom's best friend, my former roommate from college, and my landlord from my last apartment. They'll tell you I'm not dangerous or unstable. I'm just someone who had everything fall apart." Jacob studied the woman across from him, the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous energy barely contained, the desperate hope she was trying not to show. "I'll need to run a background check," he said. "Standard precaution. Should be back within 48 hours. "Of course," Lila said quickly. "Absolutely. Whatever you need. And I need complete honesty from here on out. If you're struggling, if something's not working, if you need help, you tell me. No hiding, no pretending everything's fine when it's not. Deal?" "Deal," Lila agreed, her voice steady. "Okay." Jacob nodded slowly, making a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "The background check should come back Tuesday. If it's clean, you can move into the studio that afternoon. That gives you 2 nights. Can you manage 2 more nights?" Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. "Yes. There's a shelter that sometimes has space, and if not, I know some places. I can manage. Here." Jacob pulled out his wallet and handed her 2 20s. "Get yourself a decent meal. Maybe a shower at the gym if they have a day pass. Take care of yourself these next 2 days." "I can't." "You can," Jacob interrupted. "Consider it an advance on wages. You're going to be working for me starting Tuesday, assuming everything checks out. That makes this a business expense." Lila took the money with trembling fingers. "I don't know how to thank you." "Show up Tuesday," Jacob said simply. "That's all the thanks I need." They parted ways at the library entrance. Jacob watched her walk away, wondering if he'd see her again on Tuesday, or if this was the last time, if something would go wrong or she'd change her mind or disappear back into the invisible spaces of the city. But Tuesday morning at 2 o'clock, his phone buzzed with an email. Background check complete. No criminal record, no red flags, nothing but a string of parking tickets from 3 years ago and a spotless history. He texted the address to the number Lila had given him. "Studio's ready when you are. 3247 Evergreen Street, back house, above garage. Door code is 8427. The response came within 30 seconds. "I'll be there at 3 p.m. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Jacob stood at the kitchen window at 2:45 that Tuesday afternoon, watching the driveway with an anxiety he couldn't quite justify. He'd done his due diligence. The background check was clean. The references had been enthusiastic. Lila Hart was, by all measurable standards, exactly who she claimed to be. A good person dealt a devastating hand. So why did his stomach feel like he'd swallowed lead? Is she here yet? Maddie pressed her face against the window beside him, breath fogging the glass. She'd been vibrating with excitement since he'd picked her up from school, barely touching her snack, checking the clock every 5 minutes. Not yet, Bug. Any minute now. What if she doesn't come? Maddie's voice went small, uncertain. What if she changed her mind? Then we'll know we tried, Jacob said, though the thought twisted something painful in his chest. He realized with uncomfortable clarity that he wanted Lila to show up not just for Maddie's sake, but because the alternative, imagining her back on that bus stop bench, back in the cold, back in that invisible space where the city looked through her, was unbearable. At 2:58, a figure appeared at the end of the driveway, walking with purpose despite carrying everything she owned in a single backpack and a garbage bag. Lila had cleaned up since Saturday. Her hair was washed and braided, her clothes were clean, and there was a determination in her stride that hadn't been there at the bus stop. "She came!" Maddie shrieked, already running for the door. "Maddie, wait!" But his daughter was already outside, pink jacket unzipped, racing across the driveway. Jacob followed more slowly, arriving just as Maddie launched herself at Lila in a hug that nearly knocked the woman over. "You came. You really came. I knew you would, but Daddy was worried, but I told him you'd come because you promised, and—" "Maddie, breathe," Jacob said, but he was smiling despite himself. Lila was smiling too, real and genuine, hugging Maddie back with one arm while clutching her belongings with the other. "I promised," she said simply. "I keep my promises." The studio apartment above the garage was small, maybe 400 square feet, but it was clean and warm and safe. Jacob had spent Monday evening making sure of that, checking the space heater, changing the sheets on the bed, stocking the mini fridge with basics. It wasn't much, but it was infinitely better than a bus stop bench. He led Lila up the exterior stairs while Maddie bounded ahead, narrating every detail. "That's the bed. Daddy put new sheets on it yesterday. I helped. And that's the bathroom. It's small, but it has a shower. And that's the kitchen area, but it's really just a hot plate and a fridge. But Daddy says you can use our real kitchen whenever you want, and—" "Maddie, let Lila breathe," Jacob interrupted gently. He turned to Lila, who stood frozen just inside the doorway, staring around the space like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "It's not fancy, but it's yours, for as long as this arrangement works." Lila set down her backpack and garbage bag with exaggerated care, like they might shatter. She walked slowly to the window, looked out at the tree-lined street, the quiet neighborhood, the normal suburban Tuesday afternoon stretching out below. When she turned back, tears were streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at them quickly. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to. It's just—" "You don't have to apologize for emotions in this house," Jacob said quietly, "or above this house, or anywhere on this property." "I haven't had a door that locks from the inside in 8 months, Lila said, her voice breaking. "I haven't had a place where I could close my eyes and know I'd wake up in the same place, where no one would tell me to move along or look at me like I was trash or—" She stopped, pressed her hands to her face. "I'm sorry. You've been so kind, and here I am falling apart." "You're not falling apart," Maddie said matter-of-factly. "You're just having feelings. Mrs. Rodriguez says feelings are important, and we should let them out instead of keeping them all locked up inside where they make us sick." Lila laughed through her tears. "Mrs. Rodriguez sounds very wise." "She is," Maddie agreed. "She also says snacks help with feelings. Do you want a snack?" And just like that, the tension broke. Jacob found himself smiling as his daughter took charge, leading Lila back down the stairs to the main house, chattering about the kitchen and the snack options and which crackers were best with which cheese. Over milk and graham crackers at the kitchen table, they worked out the details. Lila would pick Maddie up from school at 3:15 on the days she was with Jacob, Monday through Wednesday 1 week, Thursday through Sunday the next, alternating. She'd help with homework, prepare dinner, handle light housework. In exchange, the studio was hers rent-free, plus a small weekly stipend for food and necessities. "I'll start looking for other work too," Lila said firmly. "Part-time, something that fits around Maddie's schedule. I don't want to be dependent on this arrangement long-term. I want to rebuild, get back on my feet properly." "That's fair," Jacob agreed. "But don't rush it. Get stable first. The job will still be there when you're ready." "I'm ready now," Lila insisted, then paused. "Or I will be. Soon. I just need a few days to adjust to having a place again. To being a person again instead of... She stopped, glanced at Maddie. Instead of what I was. They set up a schedule, went over expectations, established boundaries. Lila would have her own space, her own life. This was a professional arrangement, not a charity case. Jacob needed help. Lila needed stability. Fair exchange. It all sounded so reasonable, so logical, so carefully defined. What Jacob couldn't have predicted was how quickly those careful definitions would blur. The first week was awkward, everyone hyper-aware of their roles, overly polite, stepping carefully around each other like dancers learning new choreography. Lila picked Maddie up from school with military precision, arrived back at the house at 3:35 exactly, helped with homework at the kitchen table, while Jacob worked in his home office, prepared simple dinners that she served at exactly 6:00. "You don't have to be so rigid," Jacob said finally on Thursday evening, watching her plate spaghetti with the care of someone defusing a bomb. "This is supposed to make life easier, not more stressful." "I just want to do a good job," Lila said quietly. "I don't want to give you any reason to..." She stopped herself. "Any reason to what? Kick you out?" Jacob set down his fork. "Lila, I'm not looking for reasons to end this. I'm looking for reasons to make it work." Something in her shoulders relaxed slightly. Okay, I can do that. I can try to relax." "Start by sitting down and eating with us instead of hovering," Maddie suggested. "It's weird when you stand by the counter, like you're a waitress at a restaurant." Lila hesitated, then pulled out a chair. It was such a small thing, sitting down at the dinner table instead of watching from a distance. But something shifted in the dynamic. They started talking during meals, not just about logistics, but about actual things. Maddie told stories from school. Jacob complained about difficult clients. Lila slowly, carefully, began to share pieces of her life before, teaching moments she remembered, her mother's terrible jokes, the dream she'd had of running a reading program for struggling kids. By the second week, the rhythm felt more natural. Lila started leaving small touches around the house. Fresh flowers from the farmer's market in a mason jar on the table, Maddie's backpack organized with color-coded folders, the living room straightened without being obviously cleaned. The house felt different, warmer somehow, like it was remembering how to be a home instead of just a place where two people slept between obligations. "She makes really good scrambled eggs," Maddie announced one morning, mouth full of breakfast that Lila had prepared before Jacob even woke up. "Better than yours, Daddy. No offense?" "None taken," Jacob said, catching Lila's apologetic look. "I make terrible scrambled eggs. This is a significant improvement to our quality of life." "I can teach you the trick if you want," Lila offered. "It's all about low heat and patience." "Two things I'm historically bad at," Jacob said, but he smiled when he said it. 3 weeks in, Jacob came home early from a job site, walking through the door at 2:00 to grab a tool he'd forgotten. He heard Lila's voice from the kitchen, singing something soft and old-fashioned while she worked. He paused in the hallway, listening. She had a pretty voice, untrained but genuine, and there was something about hearing someone sing while doing dishes that made a house feel lived in. He cleared his throat, not wanting to startle her. The singing stopped abruptly. "Sorry," Lila said, face flushing as she turned. "I didn't know you were home. I was just..." "Don't apologize," Jacob said. "It's nice. Hearing someone else in the house, I've gotten used to silence." "Me too," Lila said quietly. "Different kind of silence, but still. It's strange having people again. Good strange, but strange." They looked at each other for a long moment, something passing between them that neither quite knew how to name. Then Jacob grabbed his tool from the office and left, but the sound of her singing followed him all the way back to the job site. A month in, there was their first real test. Jacob got a call at 6:00 a.m. Emergency job, pipe burst at a commercial site, all hands needed immediately. He'd be gone until late, maybe midnight, or later depending on the damage. "I can handle it," Lila said when he explained, still in his pajamas in the kitchen doorway, phone in hand, stress written across his face. "School pickup, dinner, bedtime routine, I've got it." "Are you sure? That's a long day and Maddie can be a handful at bedtime." "Jacob." Lila met his eyes steadily. This is literally what you hired me for. Let me do my job. He left with misgivings, texted 3 times before noon to check in, resisted the urge to call during lunch. When he finally walked through the door at 11:47 p.m., exhausted and filthy, he found the house quiet and clean. Maddie's school bag was packed for the next day. Dishes were done. A plate of food sat in the microwave with a note. Chicken and rice. Heat 2 min. Hope the job went okay. L. He stood there in his dirty work clothes, holding the note, feeling something complicated twist in his chest. When was the last time someone had thought to leave him dinner? When was the last time he'd come home to a house that felt cared for instead of just maintained? Upstairs, Maddie was sound asleep, her room tidy, her stuffed animals arranged just how she liked them. Jacob stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of single parenthood lift slightly. Just a fraction, just enough to let him breathe easier too. The next morning, he found Lila in the kitchen early, making coffee. "Thank you," he said simply. "For yesterday. For handling everything." "That's what we agreed to," Lila said, pouring him a cup without asking. She'd learned how he took it, 2 sugars, no cream. "I told you I'd show up." "You did more than show up. You made it work. Maddie was happy when I checked her room last night. Really happy, not just okay." Lila smiled into her own coffee cup. "She's a great kid. Easy to make happy when you pay attention to what matters to her." "Still," Jacob insisted, "thank you." They developed routines, small traditions. Wednesday nights were pizza nights, homemade, with Maddie choosing the toppings no matter how weird the combinations. Saturday mornings were farmers market mornings when Maddie was there, all 3 of them going together, stopping at Maria's for donuts that Lila always insisted on paying for herself now that she had the small stipend. "You bought me my first ones," she said when Jacob protested. "Let me buy ours now." 2 months in, Lila got a part-time job at the library, 15 hours a week, afternoon shifts that fit around Maddie's school schedule. She came home triumphant, waving the offer letter. "They remembered me," she said, breathless with excitement. "From when I was there every day. The head librarian said they'd been thinking of me, hoping I was okay. They said I was always respectful, always careful with the books, always helped other patrons even when I didn't work there. So when a position opened up, they thought of me." "That's amazing," Jacob said, meaning it. "I'm proud of you." Lila's eyes went shiny. "You are?" "Of course, you're rebuilding. That takes courage." "I couldn't have rebuilt without the foundation," Lila said quietly. "Without this place. Without you taking a chance on me." That night, she cooked something special for dinner. Her mother's chicken soup, the one she'd mentioned that first day. The kitchen filled with the smell of herbs and slow-simmered broth. Maddie helped roll dough for homemade noodles, flour dusting her nose and cheeks. "Mom made this every Sunday," Lila said, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon that had clearly been purchased for this exact purpose. Even when she was sick, especially when she was sick, she said some traditions were too important to give up. They ate together at the table, the soup rich and comforting, exactly the kind of meal that felt like love translated into food. Maddie slurped her noodles enthusiastically. Jacob found himself going back for seconds, then thirds. "This is incredible," he said honestly. "Your mom was a talented cook." "She was a talented person," Lila said softly. "She would have liked you too. Would have loved seeing me here, getting back on my feet. She always said the right people show up at the right time if you're paying attention." "Maddie was paying attention," Jacob said, bumping his daughter's shoulder. "I was just trying to keep up." That night, after Maddie was asleep, Jacob found himself standing in the driveway, looking up at the lit window of the studio apartment. He could see Lila moving around inside, settling into her evening routine. She'd been with them almost 10 weeks now. The arrangement that was supposed to be temporary, practical, clearly defined, had started to feel permanent in ways he hadn't anticipated. His phone buzzed. Text from his ex-wife. "Heard from Maddie that you have a new woman living in the garage. Care to explain?" He sighed, texted back. "Employee, not a woman. Well, technically a woman, but not like that. Childcare arrangement. Maddie seems attached. Lila's good with her." There was a long pause. those three dots appearing and disappearing several times before the response came. Just be careful, for Maddie's sake. She's already been through enough disruption. Jacob stared at the message, irritation flaring. He'd been careful. Everything about this arrangement had been careful, considered, appropriate. But he couldn't deny that his ex-wife had a point. Maddie was attached. They were all getting attached in ways that went beyond a simple employer-employee relationship. He didn't respond to the text. He went inside and tried not to think about how quiet the house felt when Lila wasn't in it. 3 months in, they had their first real conflict. Maddie had been struggling with a bully at school. A bigger kid who'd been taking her snacks, making fun of her clothes, pushing her on the playground. She'd been coming home quiet, withdrawn, not mentioning it until Lila finally coaxed it out of her one afternoon over homework. "You need to tell your dad," Lila said firmly. "He needs to know." "Don't tell him," Maddie pleaded. "He'll just worry and call the school and make it worse." "It's already worse," Lila countered. "And keeping secrets from your dad isn't okay." When Jacob got home, Lila pulled him aside and told him everything. He was grateful, right up until he heard himself and realized he sounded like a different person when he talked about his daughter being hurt. His voice went hard, angry, in a way that made Lila step back. "I'll handle it," he said coldly. "I'll call the school tomorrow, file a complaint. This kid will regret ever touching my daughter." "Jacob," Lila said carefully, "maybe take a breath first, but talk to Maddie about how she wants to handle it." "She's 7, Jacob snapped. "She doesn't get to decide how to handle bullies. That's my job." "I'm not saying don't help. I'm saying don't go nuclear without including her in the conversation. She's scared you'll make it worse." "And you know that how? You've been here 3 months. I've been her father for 7 years. The words landed like slaps. Lila's face went carefully blank, that same guardedness from the first week sliding back into place. "You're right," she said quietly. "I overstepped. I apologize." She turned and walked toward the door, toward the stairs that led to her apartment. "Lila, wait." But she was already gone, the door closing softly behind her. Not slammed. That would have been easier somehow. Just closed, polite and professional and distant. Jacob stood alone in his kitchen, his anger deflating into immediate regret. He'd lashed out because he was scared, because hearing that someone hurt his daughter made him feel helpless and furious. But Lila hadn't deserved that. She'd done exactly what she should have done, told him the truth, tried to help, advocated for Maddie. He'd acted like she was the enemy instead of the ally. Maddie appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas. "Why did you yell at Lila?" "I didn't yell. Your voice was mean. You made her feel bad." Maddie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "She was trying to help me, and you made her feel bad." "I know, Bug. I messed up. I'll apologize." "You should." Maddie crossed her arms. "And you should listen to her about the bully thing. She was right. If you just call the school and yell at people, it'll make everything worse. The kid will be meaner and I'll be the tattletale and—" Her voice broke. "I just wanted someone to talk to, and Lila listened, and now you ruined it." Maddie ran upstairs before Jacob could respond, her bedroom door closing with more force than Lila's had. He stood there feeling like the world's worst father and the world's worst employer in equal measure. The next morning, Lila arrived at 7 o'clock sharp to help get Maddie ready for school. She was polite, professional, distant. She made breakfast. She helped pack the lunch. She reviewed homework. She did everything exactly right, and nothing felt right at all. "Lila," Jacob said as she prepared to leave with Maddie. "Can we talk?" "Later, after school?" "Of course," she said evenly. "Whatever you need." She walked Maddie to the car, and Jacob watched them go, his daughter's small hand in Lila's, both of them carefully not looking back at the house. He spent the day at a job site feeling terrible, replaying the argument, thinking about how quickly he'd dismissed her input, how easily he'd fallen into the comfortable pattern of pushing people away when they got too close or saw too much. When they returned at 3:45, Maddie went straight to her room. Lila started cleaning the kitchen that didn't need cleaning. "I'm sorry," Jacob said without preamble. "About last night. I was wrong. You were trying to help, and I made it about territory instead of what's best for Maddie." Lila didn't stop wiping the already clean counter. You were scared for your daughter. That's understandable. It's not an excuse for being cruel. You live here, you help raise her half the time. You have every right to have opinions about her well-being. I'm the employee, Lila said carefully. You're the parent. There are lines. Screw the lines, Jacob said, surprising them both. The lines stopped being clear about 2 months ago, and we both know it. You're not just the employee, Lila. You're... He stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. You're part of this, part of us, and I'm sorry I made you feel otherwise. Lila finally stopped cleaning, turned to face him. I don't know what I am here, Jacob. I don't know what any of this is. It started as a transaction, housing for childcare. But it doesn't feel like a transaction anymore. It feels like... She gestured helplessly. Like something else, something I'm afraid to name because naming it might ruin it. I know, Jacob said quietly. I feel it too. They stood there in the clean kitchen, not touching, barely breathing, the truth hanging between them like morning fog, visible but impossible to grasp. So what do we do? Lila asked finally. I don't know, Jacob admitted, but maybe we start by being honest about all of it. No more pretending this is just a professional arrangement when we both know it's become something more. Is that what you want? Honesty? I think we owe each other that much. Lila nodded slowly. Okay, honestly, I'm terrified. Terrified that I'm getting too comfortable, too attached, too dependent. Terrified that this will all disappear and I'll be back on that bench. Terrified that I'm starting to feel things I have no right to feel. What kind of things? Jacob asked, though he suspected he knew. The kind that make me look at you and Maddie and think family. The kind that make me want to stay, not because I need a place to live, but because I can't imagine being anywhere else. The kind that are completely inappropriate given the power dynamic here. There's no power dynamic, Jacob started, but Lila cut him off. There's always a power dynamic when someone controls your housing, Jacob. That's reality. You could end this tomorrow, ask me to leave, and I'd have no recourse. So yes, maybe I have feelings that go beyond professional respect and gratitude, but I can't act on them. I can't even really acknowledge them, because doing so puts everything at risk. Jacob absorbed this, understanding the impossible position she was in. What if I told you I feel the same way? Then I'd say we're both idiots, Lila said, but there was a hint of a smile. Probably, Jacob agreed, but maybe we can be honest idiots instead of dishonest ones. And what does that look like? I don't know. Maybe it looks like admitting that this stopped being just business a long time ago. Maybe it looks like being careful, taking things slow, making sure Maddie's okay with however this evolves. Maybe it looks like agreeing that if this doesn't work romantically, we figure out how to make it work professionally, because losing you from our lives entirely isn't an option I want to consider. That's a lot of maybes, Lila observed. I'm aware. I'm terrible at this. You're really not. Lila's voice was soft now, vulnerable. You're actually pretty good at it. Scary good. They ended the conversation without resolution, without clear definitions, without any of the certainty Jacob usually insisted upon. But they ended it honestly, with the truth finally spoken, hanging in the air between them like a promise and a question mark all at once. That night, Jacob called the school and had a long, measured conversation about Maddie's situation. Then he sat with his daughter and talked about strategies, about what she felt comfortable with, about how to handle bullies without making herself a target. Lila joined them after 20 minutes, sitting beside Maddie on the couch, adding her perspective when asked, staying quiet when not. What if we talk to Mrs. Rodriguez, Lila suggested. She could maybe arrange for you to switch lunch periods or make sure there's better supervision during recess. That could work, Maddie said slowly. And maybe Emma could eat lunch with me. She's in the other class, but we could ask. They worked it out together, the three of them, building a plan that felt collaborative rather than imposed. And when Maddie finally went to bed, reassured and calmer, Jacob found Lila in the kitchen. Thank you, he said, for earlier, for being right, for staying even when I was an ass. You weren't an ass. You were a scared parent. There's a difference. Still, thank you. Lila smiled, and for the first time since the argument, the distance between them felt smaller. You're welcome. 4 months in, Maddie asked the question they'd all been dancing around. Is Lila my stepmom now? They were at the farmer's market, standing in line for donuts, when Maddie dropped it casually between discussions of apples and honey. Jacob nearly choked on air. Lila froze mid-step. What? No. Maddie, where did that come from? Emma asked me if Lila was my stepmom because she lives at my house and makes dinner and helps with homework and goes places with us. And I said, no, she's just Lila. But then Emma said that sounds like what a stepmom does, so maybe she is. Lila is... Jacob looked helplessly at Lila, who looked equally lost. She's someone who helps take care of you, but that doesn't make her your stepmom. Why not? You like her, right? Yes, but and she likes you. I can tell. Maddie, and she likes me. So if everyone likes everyone, why can't she be family? Because it's complicated, Jacob finished weakly, aware of how inadequate the answer was. Maddie turned to Lila directly. Do you want to be family? Lila crouched down to Maddie's level, taking the question seriously. I already feel like family, she said carefully. But being someone's stepmom is a really big deal. It means lots of things that your dad and I would have to talk about a lot before deciding anything. But you want to? Maddie pressed. Lila glanced at Jacob, then back at Maddie. Yes. Someday, if things work out right and everyone agrees and your mom is okay with it and about 50 other things happen first, then yes. I would like that very much. Maddie beamed. Okay, I'll wait, but not forever. Forever is too long. She skipped ahead to the donut stand, leaving Jacob and Lila standing awkwardly in the middle of the market, the question hanging between them with all its implications. I'm sorry, Lila said quickly. I shouldn't have said... I didn't mean to presume... Don't, Jacob interrupted. Don't apologize for being honest. That's what we agreed to, remember? Still, that was probably too much honesty for a Saturday morning at the farmer's market. Maybe, Jacob conceded, but maybe it needed to be said. They collected Maddie and her donuts, walked through the market in a silence that was thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. The question had been asked. The possibility had been named. There was no taking it back, no pretending they hadn't crossed that particular threshold. That evening, after Maddie was asleep, Jacob knocked on the door of the studio apartment. Lila answered in pajamas, hair damp from a shower, a book in her hand. Hi, she said, surprised. Is everything okay? Can I come in? She stepped aside and Jacob entered the small space that had become so distinctly hers over the past months. Books stacked on the nightstand, a framed photo of her mother on the dresser, fresh flowers in a jar by the window. The room smelled like her shampoo and vanilla candles. About this morning, he started. I know, I overstepped. I got caught up in the moment and... Stop apologizing, Jacob said. Please, I came here to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay, Lila said slowly. Do you see a future here? With us? With me and Maddie? Not as the employee or the person we took in out of pity, but as... He stopped, took a breath. As someone we're building a life with? Lila was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the dim light of the studio. Yes, she said finally. God help me. Yes. I know it's complicated and messy and probably a terrible idea given how this started, but yes, I can't imagine being anywhere else. Then maybe we stop pretending this is temporary, Jacob said. Maybe we acknowledge that something's happening here, something real, and we figure it out as we go instead of constantly qualifying it. What about Maddie? What about your ex-wife? What about the fact that I'm still rebuilding my life, and you're still figuring out single parenthood, and we're both probably disasters waiting to happen? What about all of that? Jacob stepped closer. What if we just try? Carefully, slowly, but honestly. And if it doesn't work, then we figure that out too. But Lila, I don't want to spend the next year dancing around what we both know is happening. Lila looked at him, and he could see the fear and hope battling in her expression. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. Jacob didn't kiss her that night. It felt too soon, too much. But he took her hand, squeezed it once, and smiled in a way that felt like a promise. Good night, Lila. Good night, Jacob. He left, closing the door softly behind him, his heart pounding with the kind of nervousness he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. This was messy and complicated and probably a terrible idea from a dozen different angles. But Maddie was right. When everyone liked everyone, when it felt like family, maybe the rest was just details to be worked out. Maybe sometimes the best things in life started with a hug at a bus stop and grew slowly, carefully, into something neither person saw coming. Maybe sometimes broken people found each other at exactly the right moment and built something whole from all their separate pieces. 5 months in, on a Tuesday afternoon in July, Lila found Jacob sitting on the back porch, head in his hands, shoulders tight with stress. She'd arrived home from her library shift to find Maddie already picked up by her mother for the week, the house empty except for Jacob radiating tension. "What happened?" she asked, sitting beside him without waiting for an invitation. "Lost a major contract," he said without looking up. "Client went with someone cheaper. That was supposed to be 3 months of solid work. I have bills, Maddie's expenses, the house payment, and now—" He laughed bitterly. "And now I'm the one spiraling." Lila didn't offer empty platitudes. She just sat beside him, solid and present, until he finally looked up. "You're not going to lose the house," she said firmly. "You're not going to end up where I was. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me." She stood, pulled him to his feet. "Come on. We're making a budget, calling your other clients, figuring this out together. You gave me a lifeline when I needed one. I'm returning the favor." They spent the evening at the kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, making calls, crunching numbers, building a plan. By midnight, they had a strategy, enough small jobs lined up to cover basics, a payment plan negotiated with the bank, a temporary reduction in expenses until the next big contract came through. "You didn't have to do this," Jacob said as Lila finally gathered her things to head back to the studio. "Yes, I did," she said simply. "That's what family does." And there it was again, that word, that concept, that truth they kept circling back to. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They weren't just friends. They were something else, something still being defined, something that looked an awful lot like the family Maddie had asked about months ago. "Thank you," Jacob said, and meant it for everything, for the help tonight, for staying, for seeing him at his lowest and not walking away. "Always," Lila promised, and he believed her. The summer heat settled over Portland like a blanket, thick and humid in a way that made the house feel smaller. 6 months had passed since that morning at the bus stop, and the careful boundaries Jacob and Lila had established had blurred into something neither could quite define, but both recognized as essential. Jacob's financial crisis had been averted, barely, through a combination of hustle and luck and Lila's unexpected talent for spreadsheets and negotiation. She'd helped him restructure his business approach, target more reliable clients, build a buffer for the lean times. In return, he'd encouraged her library job, celebrated when she got promoted to full-time, insisted she keep most of her paycheck instead of contributing to household expenses. "You're rebuilding," he'd said when she protested. "You need savings, security, something that's yours." "This is mine," she'd argued back. "This house, this life, you and Maddie. That's mine too now, isn't it?" He hadn't known how to answer that question, so he'd just kissed her forehead and changed the subject. The gesture so natural neither of them commented on it until hours later when they both lay awake in separate beds, replaying the moment. It was Maddie who finally forced the issue, the way only children can, with brutal honesty and impeccable timing. They were at the community pool on a Saturday, Maddie's week with Jacob, the three of them sprawled on towels in the afternoon sun. Maddie had been swimming for hours, her lips slightly blue despite the heat, her hair plastered to her head in chlorine-scented tangles. She flopped down between them, water dripping onto their warm skin. "Emma's mom asked if you guys are dating," Maddie announced, examining her pruned fingers with great interest. Jacob choked on his water. Lila went very still beside him. "What did you tell her?" Jacob asked carefully. "I said I didn't know. Are you?" "It's complicated, Bug. That's what grown-ups always say when the answer is yes, but they don't want to admit it." Maddie rolled onto her stomach, propping her chin on her hands. "Mrs. Rodriguez says if you spend all your time together and you smile at each other all goofy, and you have dinner together every night, that's dating. So by those rules, you're definitely dating." "Mrs. Rodriguez has a lot of opinions," Lila murmured, but there was a smile in her voice. Mrs. Rodriguez is smart, Maddie countered. She's been married for 30 years. She knows about relationships. We're not, Jacob started, then stopped. What were they not doing? They weren't not dating. They weren't not building something. They'd been carefully dancing around labels for months, but the substance was there, solid and real and undeniable. Your dad and I are figuring things out, Lila said diplomatically. You've been figuring things out forever, Maddie said. Maybe you should stop figuring and start doing. She jumped up and ran back to the pool, leaving Jacob and Lila staring at each other across the space where their daughter, his daughter, Jacob corrected himself automatically, though the distinction felt less important every day, had been lying. She's not wrong, Lila said finally. No, Jacob agreed. She's really not. So what are we doing, Jacob? I think. He rolled onto his side to face her properly, conscious of the families around them, the public nature of this conversation, but needing to say it anyway. I think we're falling in love. Or maybe we've already fallen and we're just too scared to acknowledge it. Lila's breath caught. That's terrifying. Completely. What if we mess this up? What if it doesn't work and everything we've built falls apart and I lose you both and end up— You won't, Jacob said firmly. Even if the romantic part doesn't work, you're not going anywhere. You're family now, Lila. That doesn't change. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. I choose to. And I'm choosing to stop pretending I don't feel what I feel just because it's scary or complicated or started in the weirdest possible way. Lila was quiet for a long moment, watching Maddie do handstands in the shallow end, her small feet breaking the surface, her joyful laughter carrying across the water. Okay, she said finally. Okay, let's stop pretending. That night, after Maddie was asleep, Jacob knocked on the studio apartment door for the second time in their strange relationship. Lila answered in shorts and a tank top, summer pajamas that made her look younger, more vulnerable. I'm tired of you living above the garage, he said without preamble. I'm tired of saying goodnight at the bottom of those stairs. I'm tired of pretending that you're not the first person I want to see in the morning and the last person I want to talk to at night. Jacob, let me finish. I know this is fast. I know we should probably take things slower, be more careful, think about Maddie more. But here's the thing. I am thinking about Maddie. I'm thinking about how happy she is with you here, how she lights up when you walk in, how she asks your opinion before mine half the time now because she trusts you completely. I'm thinking about how she's thriving in ways she wasn't before you, and how that matters more than any timeline or conventional wisdom about relationship progression. Lila leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, but her expression was open, listening. I'm also thinking about me, Jacob continued, about how I'm better with you here. Calmer, happier, more balanced. You make me want to be patient instead of reactive, to listen instead of just solving, to build something steady instead of just surviving day to day. You were doing fine before me, Lila said softly. I was surviving. There's a difference. He stepped closer. I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live. With you. If you want that too. You know I do, Lila whispered. I've wanted that since month 2, even though I was terrified to admit it. Then move into the house, properly. Not as the employee, not as the person we're helping, but as my partner, as someone choosing to build a life with us. What about your ex-wife? She's already suspicious, already worried about Maddie getting too attached. Then we'll deal with it, together. We'll be honest with her, show her you're good for Maddie, prove that this isn't some impulsive disaster. But we do it as a team, Lila. As us. Lila studied him for a long moment, and Jacob could see the fear and hope warring in her expression, the same battle that had been raging since that first hug 6 months ago. Then something shifted, settled, resolved itself into certainty. Okay, she said. Yes, I want to try. For real, not just pretending everything's casual when it clearly isn't. Jacob pulled her into a hug, and for the first time it wasn't comfort or friendship, but something else. Promise. Commitment. The beginning of a choice they were both finally brave enough to make. We should probably tell Maddie officially, Lila said into his shoulder. She deserves to know what this means. Tomorrow, Jacob agreed. We'll tell her together. But Maddie, as it turned out, already knew. The next morning at breakfast, she looked at them, sitting close together at the table, at the way Lila's hand rested naturally on Jacob's arm, at the new ease between them, and simply said, "Finally, can we have pancakes to celebrate?" They laughed, and it felt like relief, like permission, like the beginning of something they'd all been building toward without quite knowing the destination. The transition from separate spaces to shared life happened gradually over the next weeks. Lila moved her belongings from the studio into the house, not into Jacob's room, but into the guest room that slowly transformed into hers. Her books on the shelves, her mother's photo on the dresser, her clothes in the closet. They were taking it slow in some ways while being all in others, a contradiction that somehow worked for them. "I want to do this right," Jacob had said. "I want Maddie to adjust, your life to stabilize, both of us to be sure before we—" "Before we what?" Lila had asked with a raised eyebrow. "Before we make it completely official. Marriage, legal commitment, all of it. I want that, eventually. But I want us to be ready." "That's very mature of you. Don't sound so surprised." They told Jacob's ex-wife on a Tuesday afternoon in a coffee shop chosen for its neutral territory, an excellent exit strategy if things went badly. Sarah arrived 15 minutes late, blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing the professional armor of someone preparing for battle. "So," she said, settling into her chair with coffee Jacob had already ordered for her. 2 pumps, vanilla, extra foam, remembered from muscle memory more than affection. "You're dating the homeless woman you hired to watch our daughter." "That's not—" Jacob started, but Lila cut him off with a hand on his arm. "It's fine. She's not wrong." Lila turned to Sarah directly. 6 months ago, I was homeless. I had lost everything. My mother, my savings, my job, my apartment. Jacob and Maddie found me at a bus stop and offered help when they had no reason to. That help turned into employment, which turned into friendship, which turned into something more. I understand why that sounds concerning." Sarah blinked, clearly not expecting directness. "It sounds like a Lifetime movie." "It probably does," Lila agreed, "but here are the facts. I have a clean background check. I have excellent references from my previous employers and my current job at the library. I have never done anything to put Maddie at risk and never would. I love that little girl like she's my own, and I love her father, which is terrifying to admit to his ex-wife, but also the truth you deserve to hear." "You've known them 6 months," Sarah said, but her voice was less sharp now, more confused than confrontational. "I've known them 6 months and spent nearly every day of those months living in their lives, seeing Jacob parent, watching Maddie grow, being present in ways that show you who people really are. Not the dating version, not the public version, but the real version, the tired Tuesday night version, the sick kid at 2 a.m. version, the bad day at work version. I know them, Sarah. And they know me, all of me, including the parts I'm not proud of." Sarah turned to Jacob. "You're really doing this? Moving in together? Playing house with someone you met on the street?" "I'm building a life with someone who makes me better and makes Maddie better," Jacob said carefully. "Someone who showed up every single day for 6 months and proved herself over and over. Yes, how we met was unconventional, but what we've built since then is real." "And what happens when it falls apart?" Sarah pressed. "When the novelty wears off and reality sets in?" "Maddie gets hurt. Again. More disruption, more instability, more people she gets attached to who leave." "I'm not leaving," Lila said firmly. "I know you have no reason to believe that, but it's true. I'm not going anywhere." "Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. I'm someone who spent 8 months with nothing, who learned what actually matters and what doesn't. What matters is the people who see you, who choose you, who show up. Jacob and Maddie are my people. I'm not losing them unless they decide they don't want me anymore." The conversation went on for another hour, Sarah asking careful questions, probing for red flags, trying to find the flaw in this strange story. Gradually, reluctantly, she seemed to accept that whatever was happening between Jacob and Lila was genuine, if unconventional. "I want to meet with you both regularly," Sarah said finally. "Monthly check-ins. I want to see that Maddie's still thriving, that this isn't negatively impacting her." "That's fair," Jacob agreed. "And if I see problems, if I think this is hurting her, we revisit custody." Also fair, Jacob said, though the words made his stomach tight with anxiety. They left the coffee shop with an uneasy peace. Not acceptance exactly, but acknowledgement that Sarah would watch, evaluate, and reserve judgment. That went better than I expected, Lila said in the car. She didn't throw her coffee at us, so yes, definite win. Think she'll come around? Eventually. Sarah's a lot of things, but she loves Maddie. If she sees that you're good for our daughter, she'll adjust. And if she doesn't, then we deal with it. Together. That word again, together. It was becoming their anchor, their promise, their answer to every uncertainty. 7 months in, they had their first real test as a couple. Jacob's mother came to visit, arriving with 2 suitcases and opinions she'd been saving up since Jacob first mentioned Lila on the phone. Helen Reed was 68, sharp-tongued, fiercely protective of her son and granddaughter, and deeply skeptical of any woman who entered their lives. "So you're Lila," Helen said, looking her up and down in the driveway with an expression that gave nothing away. "Jacob's told me about you. Quite the story." "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Reed," Lila said, extending her hand. "Jacob's told me wonderful things about you." "I'm sure." Helen's handshake was brief. "Let's see if the reality matches the sales pitch." The first 2 days were tense. Helen watched everything. How Lila interacted with Maddie, how she moved around the kitchen, how she and Jacob communicated with those small gestures and glances that couples develop without realizing. She asked pointed questions about Lila's background, her plans, her intentions, all phrased politely but with an edge that made it clear she was conducting an investigation. Lila handled it with grace that impressed even Jacob, answering honestly without defensiveness, making space for Helen's concerns without shrinking from them. The breakthrough came on the 3rd evening. Jacob had been called to an emergency job site, burst pipe, water everywhere, all hands needed immediately. He'd left apologizing profusely, promising to be home by 10, leaving Lila alone with his mother and daughter for the first time. "Well," Helen said after Jacob's truck disappeared down the street, "shall we order pizza or would you prefer to cook?" "I can cook," Lila offered. "I was planning to make chicken soup. It's my mother's recipe. If you'd like to try it." Something flickered in Helen's expression. "Your mother passed recently," Jacob said. "Almost a year ago now. Cancer." "I'm sorry, that's a terrible loss." "Thank you." Lila moved to the kitchen, pulling out ingredients, falling into the familiar rhythm of preparation. "She taught me this recipe when I was 8, said every person should know how to make at least one meal that feels like home." Helen followed her, settling at the kitchen table to watch. Maddie was in the living room, absorbed in a coloring book, humming tunelessly. "You've been through a lot," Helen said after a while, her tone less sharp now. "Losing your mother, your home, everything." "I have," Lila agreed, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "It broke me for a while, completely broke me." "And my son put you back together?" "No." Lila looked up from her cutting board. "Your son gave me a safe place to put myself back together. There's a difference. He didn't fix me. I had to do that myself. But he gave me the space and stability and support to do it. That's a gift I can never fully repay." "He's falling in love with you," Helen said bluntly. "Maybe already has fallen. I can see it all over his face when he looks at you." "I hope so," Lila said softly, "because I'm definitely in love with him. With both of them, really. She's special. She sees people in a way most kids don't, in a way most adults don't either. She gets that from her father. Jacob's always been the one to help the underdog, take in strays, fix what's broken." "I'm not a project," Lila said firmly, but without anger. "I know how this looks from the outside. Vulnerable woman rescued by good man, classic savior complex situation. But that's not what this is. We help each other. He gives me stability, I give him support. He's teaching me how to trust again. I'm teaching him how to be patient. We're both broken in our own ways, and somehow those broken pieces fit together into something whole." Helen was quiet for a long moment, watching Lila work. The efficient movements, the care she took with ingredients, the love visible in every gesture of making this meal. "His ex-wife is going to make this difficult," Helen said finally. "Sarah never could stand not being in control." "I know. But Maddie's worth it. Jacob's worth it. This family is worth fighting for." Family, Helen repeated. You think of them as your family already? Don't you think of the people you choose to build a life with as family? Blood matters, but so does choice. I choose them every day. That makes them family in the ways that count. Helen stood, moved to the stove where Lila was stirring the soup. May I try it? Lila handed her the spoon. Helen tasted carefully, her expression considering. Then she smiled for the first time since arriving. Your mother taught you well. This is excellent. Thank you, Lila said, and something in the kitchen shifted, relaxed, warmed. They ate dinner together, the three of them, and Helen asked different questions now, about Lila's work at the library, her hopes for the future, what she loved about Maddie. The interrogation was over, replaced by genuine interest. When Jacob came home at 11, exhausted and filthy, he found them in the living room, Maddie asleep on the couch between Helen and Lila, an old movie playing quietly on the TV. Everything okay? He asked, taking in the peaceful scene with visible relief. Everything's fine, Helen said. Lila made her mother's soup. It was delicious. It's really good, Daddy, Maddie mumbled without opening her eyes. Grandma had 3 bowls. I did not have 3 bowls, Helen protested, but she was smiling. 2.5 at most. Jacob looked at Lila, questions in his eyes. She smiled back, tired but content, and he understood that whatever test Helen had come to administer, Lila had apparently passed. Later, after Maddie was in bed and Helen was settled in the guest room, Jacob found Lila on the back porch, breathing in the cool night air. My mother likes you, he said, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. She's protective. I respect that. She doesn't like people easily, but she told me before bed that you're good for me, good for Maddie. Coming from her, that's basically a marriage blessing. Premature, don't you think? But Lila was smiling. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly the right time to start thinking about making this permanent. Lila turned in his arms to face him. Are you talking about what I think you're talking about? Not yet, Jacob said, but soon. I want to give you time to be fully stable, to know this is what you want without any pressure or power dynamic complicating things. But Lila, when you're ready, when we're both sure, I'm going to ask you to marry me. Fair warning. Fair warning received, Lila whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And fair warning back. I'm probably going to say yes. They stood together on the porch, the summer night wrapping around them, the house behind them full of sleeping people they loved, the future stretching out ahead filled with possibility and promise. 8 months in, Lila had her own breakthrough, her first full paycheck from the library that she'd saved without spending, built up into something real. She showed Jacob the bank statement on a Saturday morning, her hands trembling slightly with pride. Look, actual savings, enough for first and last month's rent if I needed it, enough for emergencies, enough to know I could survive on my own if I had to. You're not going to have to, Jacob said, but he understood what she was really showing him. Proof that she was here by choice, not necessity, that she'd rebuilt herself into someone who could stand independently, but chose to stand beside him instead. I know, but I needed to know I could. I needed to not be the woman on the bench anymore, not completely. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I want to contribute more around here. Rent, groceries, utilities. A fair share. Lila, please. Let me do this. Let me be a partner in all the ways, not just the emotional ones. They renegotiated their arrangement, making it more equitable, more like what it actually was, 2 adults building a shared life, splitting costs and responsibilities, neither one dependent on the other, but both choosing interdependence. This feels more real, Lila said after they'd worked out the new budget. Like we're really doing this together. We've been doing this together for 8 months. I know, but now it's official. On paper. Equal partnership. You're thinking like someone who's been broke, Jacob observed gently. You know I don't care about the money, right? I never cared about the money. I care about the money, Lila countered. I care about not being charity, not being the project. I care about pulling my weight. You've been pulling your weight since day 1. Then let me pull it officially, please. Jacob pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. Okay. Equal partners, official, and on paper. 9 months after the hug that started everything, Maddie asked if she could call Lila something other than just Lila. They were making Halloween costumes. Maddie wanted to be a dragon, which required engineering skills none of them quite possessed, when she brought it up. Emma calls her stepmom Mama Ruth because her real mom is Mama, and she didn't want to get confused, but she wanted something special for Ruth too. That's sweet, Lila said, pinning fabric that kept slipping. So I was thinking maybe I could call you something, not Mom, because I have a mom, but something that means you're special, like family. Lila's hand stilled on the fabric. Jacob put down the scissors he'd been wielding with limited success. What did you have in mind? Jacob asked carefully. Maybe Lila Mom, or Lila Mama, or just, I don't know, something. Maddie looked between them anxiously. Is that okay? Would Mom be mad? We'd need to talk to your mom first, Jacob said. Make sure she's comfortable with whatever you choose. But Maddie, if you want to call Lila something special, something that shows she's family, I think that's beautiful. What do you think? Maddie asked Lila directly. Lila was crying, silent tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth. I think, she said when she could speak, that I would be honored to be called anything you want to call me, whatever feels right to you. How about Lila for regular, but Mama for special, Maddie suggested. Like when you make my favorite breakfast, or help me with hard homework, or give really good hugs, for the mom things. Mama L, Lila repeated, testing the words. I love it. They did talk to Sarah, who took it better than expected. She's been in your life almost a year, Sarah said during their monthly coffee meeting. She's clearly not going anywhere. And honestly, Maddie talks about her constantly, always positive things. If Maddie wants to acknowledge that relationship with a special name, I'm not going to stand in the way. She looked at Lila directly. But she only gets one mom. That's me. This name is something different. I would never try to replace you, Lila said firmly. Maddie loves you. You're her mother, and that's sacred. I'm the bonus person who also loves her. The bonus person, Sarah repeated, something softening in her expression. I can live with that, as long as you keep being good for her. I will. I promise. 10 months in, Jacob took Lila back to the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, just the two of them. Maddie was with Sarah for the weekend, and they had rare time alone, the kind of space that had become precious as their lives intertwined more completely. They walked through the familiar stalls, stopped at Maria's for donuts, sat on the same bench where they'd shared their first meal together. So much had changed since that February morning. Everything had changed. I've been thinking about that first day, Lila said, biting into her donut with obvious pleasure. How terrified I was. How certain I was that this was some elaborate setup, that you'd turn out to be dangerous, or want something I couldn't give, or I'd be exactly who I said I was, Jacob interrupted with a smile. That seemed like the least likely option, Lila admitted. Good people don't just help strangers. That's what 8 months of homelessness teaches you. Good people do help strangers. They just don't make headlines for it. You changed my life, Jacob. You and Maddie, you quite literally saved my life. You changed ours too, Jacob said seriously. Maddie's happier, healthier, more confident. I'm less stressed, more balanced, remembering how to actually live instead of just surviving. We saved each other, Lila. That's what makes this work. They finished their donuts in comfortable silence, watching the market bustle around them, the normal Saturday morning life that had seemed impossible a year ago. Lila, Jacob said finally, setting down his coffee cup with exaggerated care, I have something I want to ask you. Okay, she said slowly, picking up on his nervous energy. We've been doing this, us, for almost a year now. And I know we said we'd take things slow, make sure we were both ready, not rush into anything. But here's the thing. I am ready. I've been ready for months. And I think you are too. Jacob, he was reaching into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made Lila's breath catch. This isn't a proposal, he said quickly. Not yet. But it's a promise that I'm going to ask you soon to be my wife, to officially be Maddie's bonus person, to legally be my family, to make permanent what we've been building. This ring. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. This ring was my grandmother's. Mom gave it to me last week, said Gran would have loved you, would have understood exactly how this happened. It's beautiful, Lila whispered. I'm not asking you to wear it yet. I'm asking you to think about whether you want to. Whether you're ready for permanent, for legal, for all in. Take your time. No pressure. But know that I'm ready when you are. Lila looked at the ring, at Jacob's hopeful, anxious face, at the market around them where their story had really begun. She thought about the woman she'd been 10 months ago, broken, hopeless, invisible. She thought about the woman she was now, whole, healing, loved, and loving in return. Yes, she said. Yes, you'll think about it? Yes, I'm ready. Yes, I want permanent. Yes to all of it. She was crying and laughing at the same time. You can ask me properly whenever you want, with whatever romantic gesture you're planning, but my answer is already yes. Jacob stared at her. You're sure? You don't need more time. I've had 10 months. That's enough time to know. Ask me, Jacob. Do it right now, right here on this bench where you first bought me breakfast and made me remember what it felt like to be seen. So he did. He got down on one knee right there in the middle of the farmer's market, holding out his grandmother's ring while vendors paused mid-transaction and other shoppers stopped to watch. Lila Hart, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Maddie's bonus mom, my partner in this beautiful, complicated, messy life we're building? Yes, Lila said through tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her all along, and kissed her while the farmer's market erupted in applause around them. Maria was crying behind her donut stand. The honey vendor was shouting congratulations. Random strangers who didn't know their story but recognized love when they saw it were smiling, clapping, sharing in this moment. We're getting married, Lila said wonderingly, looking at the ring on her hand like it might disappear. We're getting married, Jacob confirmed. You're going to be Mrs. Reed. Or you could be Mr. Hart, Lila teased. I'm not proud. I'll be whatever you want me to be. They walked through the rest of the market in a daze, hand in hand, unable to stop smiling. They called Maddie from Jacob's phone, putting her on speaker. We have news, Bug. You're getting married, Maddie shrieked before they could say anything. I knew it. I told Emma you were going to. When's the wedding? Can I be the flower girl? Can we get a dog now? How did you... We just decided literally 15 minutes ago. Daddy, I've known since month 3. You guys were so obvious. Can we please get a dog? We'll discuss the dog, Jacob said, laughing. But yes, we're getting married. And yes, you can absolutely be the flower girl. Best day ever, Maddie declared. I have to call Emma and Grandma and Mrs. Rodriguez. Everyone needs to know. She hung up before they could respond, presumably to begin her campaign of spreading the news. Our daughter is a menace, Jacob said affectionately. Our daughter, Lila repeated softly, testing the words. I like the sound of that. They ended up back on that first bench, the engagement ring catching the autumn sunlight, their future spread out before them bright and certain. Jacob thought about that February morning, about his daughter's spontaneous compassion, about a woman crying on a bench with a photograph pressed to her heart. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For showing up that day at the library, for being brave enough to trust us, for choosing to stay. Thank you for seeing me, Lila countered, for treating me like a person when the world had decided I was invisible, for taking the biggest risk of your life on a stranger with nothing to offer but gratitude and hope. You had everything to offer, Jacob said. We just had to wait for you to remember that. They sat together as the market wound down, vendors packing up, families heading home, the Saturday afternoon settling into evening. Soon they'd go home too, call Sarah and tell her the news, start planning a wedding, figure out all the logistics of legally combining their lives. But for now, they just sat on the bench where it all began, engaged and in love and impossibly grateful for the hug that changed everything. The news of their engagement spread through their small circle like wildfire, bringing reactions as varied as the people who gave them. Helen cried happy tears over the phone and immediately began planning to come back for the wedding. Sarah took it with surprising grace, asking only that they wait until after the holidays to avoid disrupting Maddie's schedule more than necessary. Emma's mother sent a congratulatory text that ended with "I knew it," followed by 6 heart emojis. The hardest conversation came 3 days after the proposal, when Lila sat alone in the studio apartment she no longer slept in but hadn't yet fully vacated, holding her mother's photograph in both hands. "I'm getting married, Mom," she whispered to the image. "To a good man. A really good man. He has a daughter who calls me Mama L and makes me laugh every single day. You would have loved them both so much." She traced her finger along her mother's face in the photo, remembering her laugh, her terrible jokes, the way she'd hummed while cooking. "I wish you were here. I wish you could meet them, could walk me down the aisle, could see that I'm okay, better than okay. I'm happy, Mom. After everything, I'm actually happy." Jacob found her there an hour later, tears dried on her cheeks, still clutching the photograph. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her on the small bed, their shoulders touching in silent solidarity. "She would have planned the whole wedding," Lila said finally. "Would have had opinions about flowers and music and seating arrangements. Would have driven me crazy, and I would have loved every minute of it." "Tell me about her," Jacob said softly. "Really tell me. Not the sad parts, not the sick parts. The real her." So Lila did. She told him about her mother's obsession with mystery novels, how she'd read 3 a week and always guessed the killer by chapter 4. About her terrible singing voice that never stopped her from belting out show tunes while doing dishes. About the time she'd accidentally dyed all their towels pink in a laundry mishap and declared it an aesthetic choice. About her fierce love, her quick wit, her ability to make everything feel manageable even when it wasn't. "She sounds amazing," Jacob said when Lila finally wound down. "She was, and she would have told me to marry you without hesitation. She always said life was too short to wait for perfect timing, that you grab happiness when it shows up and hold on tight." "Smart woman." "The smartest." Lila leaned her head on Jacob's shoulder. "I'm going to carry her picture on my bouquet." "So she's there in some way." "That's perfect," Jacob said, kissing the top of her head. "She'll be there. I promise." They decided on a spring wedding, 6 months away, long enough to plan properly, but short enough that the waiting didn't feel endless. Maddie appointed herself assistant wedding planner, a role she took terrifyingly seriously for an 8-year-old. "We need a color scheme," she announced one evening, spreading magazines across the kitchen table that she'd clearly been collecting for months. "I'm thinking purple and silver, or maybe blue and gold. What do you think?" "I think you've been planning this since before we got engaged," Lila said, amused. "Obviously, I needed to be prepared. Emma's sister had a wedding last year and it was boring because nobody planned ahead. Our wedding is not going to be boring." "Our wedding," Jacob repeated, catching Lila's eye with a smile. "I like how you're taking ownership here, Bug." "Well, I'm the flower girl. That's an important job. I need to make sure everything is perfect." Maddie flipped through a magazine with the intensity of a seasoned event planner. "Also, we need to talk about the dog situation." "There is no dog situation," Jacob said automatically. "There will be when we are a complete family. Complete families have dogs. It's basically a rule." "Where are you getting these rules?" Lila asked, laughing. "Emma. And also Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter has a dog, and she says it teaches responsibility and unconditional love." "We'll discuss the dog after the wedding," Jacob said firmly. "One major life change at a time." "Fine," Maddie sighed dramatically, "but I'm making a list of good dog names just in case." The wedding planning became a strange kind of therapy, forcing Lila to think about celebration instead of survival, about joy instead of fear. She found herself excited about details she'd never cared about before. The difference between ivory and champagne, whether to have a sit-down dinner or buffet style, what song should play for their first dance. "I never thought I'd care about centerpieces," she told Jacob one night as they scrolled through options on her laptop. "But look at these. Wildflowers in mason jars. Simple, beautiful, not trying too hard. That's us, right?" "That's definitely us," Jacob agreed, though privately he thought they could get married in a parking lot with paper plates, and he'd be just as happy. What mattered was the commitment, not the decoration. But watching Lila's face light up over flower arrangements, Seeing her plan a future instead of just surviving the present, that mattered enormously. The holidays came and went in a blur of activity. Thanksgiving with Helen, who brought 3 different pie recipes and opinions about wedding venues. Christmas split between houses. Maddie shuttling gifts between parents, both homes now feeling equally like home because Lila was welcome in both. New Year's Eve, just the 3 of them, Maddie falling asleep on the couch at 10:30, Jacob and Lila watching the ball drop in Times Square on TV, kissing at midnight with champagne and promises. "Next year at this time we'll be married," Lila said, curled against Jacob's side on the couch. "Next year at this time you'll be stuck with me legally," Jacob corrected with a grin. Best kind of stuck. In January, they started premarital counseling at the suggestion of Sarah, who'd surprised them both by recommending a therapist she'd seen after the divorce. "It's not that I think you'll fail," she'd said carefully, "but you're blending a family in an unusual situation. It can't hurt to have professional guidance." The counseling sessions were harder than either expected, forcing them to confront questions they'd been avoiding. What would parental authority look like once Lila was legally Maddie's stepmother? How would they handle conflicts over discipline, rules, expectations? What about future children? Did they want more kids, and if so, when? How would they merge finances completely, and what would happen to the house, the savings, everything if the marriage failed? "I hate thinking about it failing," Lila said after a particularly difficult session. "It feels like bad luck." "The therapist says it's practical," Jacob reminded her. "Not pessimistic, just prepared." "I know, but I've already lost so much. The idea of losing this too, of having an exit plan, it makes it feel less permanent somehow." "Having a prenup doesn't make the marriage less real," their counselor had said. "It makes it more honest. You're both bringing different things to this relationship. Jacob has assets, property, a daughter. Lila has been in a vulnerable position. Protecting both of you isn't cynical, it's caring." They signed the prenup in February, a document that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. Lila would have rights to the house after 5 years of marriage, partial custody of Maddie if the relationship ended, fair division of assets accumulated during the marriage. It was generous, protective, and completely at odds with the fairy tale they were trying to believe in. "This doesn't mean I think we'll fail," Jacob said as they left the lawyer's office, papers signed and notarized. "It means I'm protecting you even in worst-case scenarios." "I know," Lila said quietly. "It's just hard to plan for divorce while planning a wedding." "Then let's focus on the wedding. Let's focus on the fact that in 2 months, you're going to be my wife, and none of this paperwork will matter because we're going to make this work." They did focus on the wedding, throwing themselves into final details with renewed energy. The venue was booked, a small historic barn outside the city, rustic and intimate, perfect for their 75 guests. The flowers were ordered, wildflowers in mason jars, just like Lila wanted. The food was arranged, comfort food from local restaurants, nothing fancy, just good. The music was settled, a friend of Jacob's who played guitar, simple and live and personal. Maddie's flower girl dress arrived in March, purple with silver trim, making her look older and more grown-up than Jacob was ready to accept. She twirled in front of the mirror, petals already in hand despite the wedding being weeks away. "I'm going to be the best flower girl ever," she declared. "I've been practicing my walk. Want to see?" She proceeded to demonstrate a processional walk that was more skip than glide, scattering imaginary petals with enthusiasm that definitely prioritized energy over elegance. "Perfect," Lila said, trying not to laugh. "Absolutely perfect." "You don't think I should be more serious? Emma's sister was really serious at her wedding. Like this." Maddie demonstrated an exaggeratedly solemn expression that looked more like she was attending a funeral. "I think you should be you," Jacob said. "Happy, excited, full of energy. That's what makes you special." "Okay, good, because the serious face was hard to hold." 2 weeks before the wedding, Sarah asked to meet with them again, this time bringing her new boyfriend, a detail she'd been keeping quiet until now. David was an accountant, steady and kind, clearly nervous about meeting his girlfriend's ex-husband and his unusual new family situation. "I wanted you to meet him before the wedding," Sarah explained over coffee at their usual spot. "And I wanted to say something officially in front of witnesses." She turned to Lila directly, her expression serious but not unkind. I was wrong about you. When this started, I thought you were going to be a disaster, a phase, someone who'd disrupt Maddie's life and then disappear. But you didn't. You showed up every day for over a year. You've been good for my daughter. I can see it in how she talks about you, how confident she's become, how happy she is. You've been good for Jacob, too, though I'm less invested in his happiness these days. Thanks, Jacob said dryly, but he was smiling. I'm trying to give a compliment here, Sarah continued. What I'm saying is, you've earned this. You've earned being Maddie's bonus mom, being part of this family, being happy after everything you went through. I'm not going to stand in the way anymore. I'm going to support it, officially. Lila's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. Just keep being good to her, Sarah said. That's all I ask. Always, Lila promised. They left the coffee shop with Sarah's blessing, something neither had realized they'd been waiting for until they had it. David had shaken their hands earnestly, promising to be at the wedding, saying something about how love stories that start unconventionally often end up the strongest. That was unexpected, Jacob said in the car. Good unexpected, Lila added. Really good. The week before the wedding was chaos. Helen arrived with even more opinions and 3 more pie recipes. Friends descended to help with last-minute details. The house filled with boxes of decorations, borrowed chairs, gift bags for guests, all the physical manifestations of celebration. Maddie was vibrating with excitement, barely sleeping, talking nonstop about the wedding, the dress, the flowers, the cake, the dog they still weren't getting, but she remained optimistic about. What if I trip during the processional? She worried on Thursday night. What if I drop all the petals at once instead of spreading them out? What if you're wonderful and everyone loves you and it's perfect? Lila interrupted, braiding Maddie's hair before bed. What if you stop worrying and just enjoy being part of something beautiful? But what if... Maddie, Lila turned her around gently. Whatever happens, happens. Perfection isn't the goal. Being together, celebrating our family, that's the goal. You could literally dump all the petals in one spot and run down the aisle and it would still be perfect because you're there. You really think so? I know so. The night before the wedding, tradition dictated that Jacob and Lila sleep separately, a custom Maddie insisted they follow because that's how weddings work, Daddy. Everyone knows that. So Jacob stayed at the house while Lila went to Helen's hotel room, taking Maddie with her for a girls' night that apparently involved face masks and wedding prep talk. Jacob found himself alone in the house that had transformed so completely over the past year. From a place where he and Maddie merely existed between his ex-wife's weeks to a home filled with laughter and cooking smells and love. He walked through rooms that showed Lila's influence everywhere. Her books on the shelves, her mother's soup recipe card magneted to the fridge, photos of the 3 of them scattered throughout. His phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Can't sleep, too excited. Also, Maddie won't stop talking about the dog she's definitely getting after this. He smiled, texted back. We're not getting a dog. That's what you think. I've been worn down. We're probably getting a dog. Traitor. You love me anyway. I really do. See you at the altar. Can't wait. Jacob set down his phone and stood in the quiet house, thinking about the journey that brought them here. About a February morning and a crying woman on a bench. About a daughter's compassionate heart. About choices made moment by moment that accumulated into a completely different life. Tomorrow he'd marry that woman from the bench, would make official what had been true for months, would stand in front of everyone they knew and promise forever to someone he'd met in the most improbable way possible. He couldn't wait. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, spring sunshine warming the April morning, flowers blooming in riotous color outside the barn venue. Jacob arrived early with his groomsmen, his brother and 2 close friends, all of them slightly nervous and definitely underprepared for the emotions about to hit. You're really doing this, his brother said as they stood in the small groom's preparation room. Marrying the homeless woman you found at a bus stop. If one more person calls her that, Jacob said mildly, I'm going to lose it. Her name is Lila. She's brilliant and kind and strong, and she's about to be my wife. Stop reducing her to the worst moment of her life. You're right, his brother said immediately. Sorry, that was thoughtless. I'm happy for you, man. really happy. The guests started arriving at 2 o'clock for the 3 o'clock ceremony. Jacob watched from a window as people he hadn't seen in years showed up to celebrate. Old friends, distant relatives, coworkers, neighbors. Maria from the donut stand arrived with her husband, both of them beaming. Lila's former coworkers from the school came, the principal who'd written her reference letter drying her eyes before even entering the barn. At 2:45, the music started. Jacob took his position at the altar, his brother beside him, trying to remember to breathe. This was happening. This was really happening. The processional began with Sarah and David, Maddie's parents, presenting a united front that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Then came Helen, walking slowly down the aisle with the aid of Jacob's uncle, her face already wet with tears. Then came Maddie. She appeared at the entrance to the barn in her purple dress, basket of petals clutched in both hands, her face a mixture of concentration and pure joy. She started down the aisle exactly as she'd practiced, enthusiastic, energetic, absolutely not the solemn glide of traditional flower girls. She scattered petals with abandon, grinning at guests, waving at people she recognized, completely herself in the best possible way. When she reached the altar, she stage whispered to Jacob, "I didn't drop them all at once." "You were perfect, Bug," he whispered back. The music changed then, shifting to something softer, more emotional. The guests stood, turning toward the entrance. And there was Lila. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, nothing elaborate, just elegant and understated and completely her. Her hair was loose, flowers woven through the waves, her mother's photograph tucked into her bouquet just as she'd promised. She walked alone down the aisle. No father to give her away, no family to present her. But she wasn't alone. Not really. Every person in that barn had been part of her journey back to this moment. Her eyes found Jacob's and didn't waver, the connection between them visible even from a distance. She was smiling and crying at the same time, each step bringing her closer to the future they'd built from impossible circumstances. When she reached the altar, Jacob couldn't help himself. He stepped forward to meet her, taking her hands, breaking protocol, because he couldn't wait another second to touch her. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he whispered back. "You're beautiful." "You're not supposed to talk yet," she said, but she was smiling. "I'm breaking all kinds of rules today." The ceremony was short and personal, written by them with the officiant's help, focused less on tradition and more on truth. They spoke about being found when you're lost, about families built by choice rather than blood, about second chances and new beginnings, and the courage it takes to trust again. "Love isn't just a feeling," the officiant said, reading from the script they'd prepared. "It's a choice made daily, moment by moment, to see someone fully and choose them anyway." Jacob and Lila have been making that choice for over a year now, building something remarkable from circumstances that could have broken them both. Today, they're making that choice official, permanent, legal, and binding. When it came time for vows, Jacob went first, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Lila, when Maddie let go of my hand and walked toward you that morning, I was terrified. I didn't know who you were or what you needed, or if letting my daughter near you was the worst parenting decision I'd ever make. But Maddie knew something I didn't yet, that you weren't a stranger to be feared, but family we hadn't met yet. You've spent this year proving her right in every possible way. You've loved my daughter like she's yours. You've supported my dreams and challenged my weaknesses. You've turned our house into a home and my existence into a life. I promise to see you every day the way Maddie saw you that first day, not as someone broken who needs fixing, but as someone whole who deserves love. I promise to choose you every morning, every moment, every difficulty. I promise to build a life with you that honors how far we've both come and celebrates where we're going. I love you, Lila Hart, and I cannot wait to love you as my wife." Lila was openly crying now, not even trying to hide it. When it was her turn, she took a shaky breath and began. "Jacob, I've spent a lot of time over the past year trying to figure out what I did to deserve you and Maddie. What cosmic luck brought me to that bus stop on that specific morning. I've decided it doesn't matter. What matters is that I was there, you saw me, and Maddie decided I needed a hug. What matters is that you took a risk on someone with nothing to offer, but hope and hunger for belonging. What matters is that you've given me everything: safety, stability, family, home, love, and never once made me feel like it was charity. You've let me earn my place here while also making it clear I already belonged. That's a gift I can never repay, but I can spend my life trying. I promise to love Maddie like she's mine, because she is. I promise to support your dreams and call you out when you're being stubborn. I promise to make your mother's soup recipe every Sunday and teach Maddie everything my mom taught me. I promise to remember where we started and never take for granted where we are. I love you, Jacob Reed, and I'm so grateful I get to love you forever. There wasn't a dry eye in the barn by the time they finished. Even Jacob's brother was discreetly wiping at his face, and Maria was full-on sobbing in the third row. "By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon," the officiant said with a smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jacob, you may kiss your bride." He did, pulling Lila close, kissing her with every ounce of love and promise and gratitude he possessed. The barn erupted in applause, whistles, cheers. Maddie jumped up and down excitedly, petals flying everywhere. Someone, probably Maria, yelled, "Finally!" loud enough to be heard over everything else. When they broke apart, both breathless and grinning, the officiant added one more thing. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time anywhere, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Reed and their daughter Maddie, a family built on compassion, sustained by love, and absolutely perfect in every way that matters." The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Casual, joyful, full of good food and better company. They'd set up long tables in the barn, decorated with those wildflowers in mason jars, string lights creating a warm glow as evening approached. The meal was family style, everyone passing dishes and sharing food, the formality of traditional wedding dinners replaced with something that felt more like a really good dinner party. Maddie made a speech that was supposed to be short, but went on for 5 minutes, detailing her entire friendship with Lila from the bus stop encounter to present day, including editorial commentary on how obvious it was they were going to fall in love, and I told Emma so. Helen made a speech about how her son had always had a good heart, but Lila had made it better, about how family isn't always blood but always choice, about how she'd gained a daughter today, and it was the best gift her grandson could have given her. She cried through the whole thing, which made everyone else cry, which made the makeup situation dire all around. Sarah stood up unexpectedly, her speech short but powerful. "I wasn't sure about this at first," she admitted. "I was protective of my daughter, suspicious of how fast everything happened, worried about disruption and instability. But Lila proved me wrong every single day for a year. She showed up. She stayed. She loved my daughter without trying to replace me, supported my ex-husband without making me feel obsolete, and built something beautiful from terrible circumstances. That takes a special kind of person. Lila, I'm grateful Maddie has you. Congratulations to you both." The dancing started after dinner, the makeshift floor filling quickly with people who'd had just enough champagne to forget their self-consciousness. Jacob and Lila's first dance was to a song his guitarist friend played live, something soft and romantic about finding home in another person. "We did it," Lila whispered as they swayed together. "We're actually married." "Legally binding and everything," Jacob confirmed. "No backing out now." "Wouldn't dream of it. Even when I'm stubborn about renovations and refuse to hire help I clearly need? Even then. Even when I inevitably cave and we get the dog Maddie's been campaigning for? Especially then." Lila pulled back to look at him. "We're really getting a dog?" "We're probably getting a dog," Jacob admitted. "She's worn me down. You've both worn me down. I'm completely defenseless against the women in my life." "Good," Lila said, kissing him softly. "That's exactly how it should be." They danced through 3 more songs before Maddie cut in, insisting on a dance with both of them. They made a small circle, the 3 of them, moving to music that was probably too slow for the energy Maddie brought to it, laughing at themselves and each other and the sheer improbable joy of the day. "Best family ever," Maddie declared, standing on Jacob's feet to reach height, holding Lila's hand with the other. "Right?" "Best family ever," they both agreed. The party went late into the evening, long after the official schedule said it should end. People lingered, not wanting the night to finish, the celebration to conclude, the magic to break. It was close to midnight when the last guests finally left, when the venue staff started cleaning up, when Jacob and Lila found themselves alone for the first time as husband and wife. They sat on a bench outside the barn, the same stars overhead that had been there that first morning, the same spring air wrapping around them, but everything else transformed completely. "I keep thinking about her," Lila said quietly, leaning into Jacob's warmth. "About the woman I was that morning, how hopeless I felt, how certain I was that things would never get better. And now?" Jacob prompted. "And now I'm sitting here married to the man I love, stepmom to the most amazing kid on the planet, with a home and a job and a future I actually want to live. It's almost too much. Like I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "Not a dream," Jacob said firmly. "Real. All of it. You earned this, Lila. You showed up every day, did the work, rebuilt yourself piece by piece. This isn't charity or luck. This is what happens when someone refuses to give up." "I would have given up," Lila admitted. "If Maddie hadn't hugged me that morning, if you hadn't bought me a donut, if you hadn't taken that insane risk of letting me into your lives, I would have given up. Maybe not that day, but soon. I was so close to just disappearing. But you didn't. And we won't let you, ever. You're stuck with us now, legally, officially, permanently stuck." "Best kind of stuck," Lila repeated the words from New Year's Eve, smiling in the darkness. They sat together as night deepened, watching the barn lights slowly extinguish, the staff finishing cleanup, the venue returning to normal. Tomorrow they'd leave for a short honeymoon, just 3 days because that's all they could manage with Maddie's schedule and work obligations, but 3 days alone to be newlyweds. Then they'd return home, return to normal life, return to being the family they'd built one choice at a time. "Ready to go?" Jacob asked eventually, standing and offering his hand. "Ready," Lila said, taking it. They walked to the car hand in hand, Lila's cream dress dirty at the hem from a day of celebration, Jacob's suit jacket long since abandoned. Behind them, the barn stood quiet and dark, having witnessed the official transformation of 3 separate people into one permanent family. Ahead of them, the road stretched out toward home, toward their life, toward every tomorrow they'd promised each other. And somewhere in between, invisible but undeniable, was the ghost of that February morning when everything changed, when a little girl let go of her father's hand, when a woman crying on a bench accepted a hug, when 3 broken pieces found each other and began the slow work of becoming whole. The honeymoon was 3 days in a cabin on the Oregon coast, nothing extravagant but perfect in its simplicity. They walked on the beach at sunrise, cooked simple meals together, slept late, and talked about everything and nothing. It was the first time since that February morning that they'd had extended time alone, without Maddie's needs or work obligations or the constant background hum of building a life pulling at their attention. "I keep expecting something to go wrong," Lila admitted on their second evening, curled up on the cabin's small couch while rain pattered against the windows. "Like this much happiness isn't sustainable. Like the universe is going to remember I don't deserve it and take it all back." "That's trauma talking," Jacob said gently, pulling her closer. "Not reality. You deserve every bit of this. And the universe doesn't work on some cosmic fairness scale where bad people get punished and good people get rewarded. Sometimes terrible things happen to wonderful people, and sometimes those same people get second chances. You're having yours. What if I mess it up? Then we'll fix it, together. That's what marriage means. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present and willing to work through the imperfect parts." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," Jacob said. "Not easy, but simple. I love you. You love me. We both love Maddie. We show up for each other. We communicate. We forgive. We keep choosing this. That's it. That's the whole formula." Lila was quiet for a moment, listening to the rain, feeling the steady warmth of Jacob beside her. "My mom used to say that love was a verb, not a noun, that it's something you do, not something you feel. Your mom was right about a lot of things. She would have loved you, would have given you a hard time about your coffee-making skills and your tendency to leave cabinet doors open, but she would have loved you." "I leave cabinet doors open?" "Constantly. It's like a compulsion. I've been closing them behind you for months." "Why didn't you say something?" "Because it's endearing. And because my mom left toothpaste caps off and it drove me crazy, but I'd give anything to find an uncapped toothpaste tube now. The annoying habits are part of loving someone. You don't get the good without the irritating. Jacob kissed the top of her head. Feel free to tell me when my irritating habits cross the line from endearing to actually annoying. I will, right after you tell me when my obsessive list-making and need to plan everything 6 weeks in advance gets to be too much. Deal. They returned home on a Tuesday afternoon to find Helen had been staying with Maddie, and both had clearly been up to something. There were drawings taped to every wall, childish but enthusiastic artwork depicting their wedding day, complete with stick figure versions of all of them, and a decidedly optimistic representation of how the ceremony had gone. We made a welcome home surprise, Maddie announced, launching herself at both of them. Do you like it? Grandma said it was okay to use tape on the walls. Thanks, Mom, Jacob said dryly, already mentally calculating how much paint touch-up this was going to require. You're welcome, dear, Helen said serenely. We also may have discussed the dog situation extensively. We're getting a dog, Maddie shouted before either of them could respond. Grandma said it's important for families to have dogs, and she helped me make a list of responsibilities I'll handle, and we even looked at the shelter website, and there's this one named Biscuit who needs a home, and breathe, Bug, Jacob said, laughing despite himself. One thing at a time. But we're considering it, right? Maddie looked between them with desperate hope. You said after the wedding we could consider it. Jacob looked at Lila, who was trying not to smile. We did say that, didn't we? We definitely did, Lila confirmed. And I may have been doing some research myself. There's actually a good argument for rescue dogs being excellent for kids' emotional development, and you've been researching dogs? Jacob asked, betrayed. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm on the family's side, and the family seems to want a dog. 3 against 1, Helen said cheerfully. Democracy in action. This is a dictatorship, not a democracy, Jacob protested weakly, but he was already losing and everyone knew it. 2 weeks later, they brought home Biscuit, a medium-sized mutt with floppy ears and sad eyes, who had been at the shelter for 6 months without anyone choosing him. He was older, calmer than a puppy, already house-trained, and he attached himself to their family with the desperate gratitude of someone who'd been waiting a long time to be chosen. He was like me, Lila said softly the first night, watching Biscuit curl up on the dog bed they'd bought, his body finally relaxing into safety. Waiting for someone to see him, to take a chance, to bring him home. And now he's home, Maddie said, already in love. Already planning how Biscuit would sleep in her room and be her best friend and go everywhere with her. Now he's home, Lila agreed, and something else healed in her heart, some peace that needed to give to someone else what had been given to her. The summer passed in a blur of normal life that felt miraculous precisely because it was normal. Jacob's business stabilized and then grew, Lila got another promotion at the library, Maddie thrived in summer camp and swimming lessons. They had barbecues in the backyard, movie nights on the couch, farmers market Saturdays that had become tradition. Biscuit proved to be the perfect family dog, patient with Maddie, loyal to Jacob, and completely devoted to Lila in a way that suggested he knew exactly who had advocated hardest for his adoption. In August, they went back to the bus stop, the 3 of them plus Biscuit, standing on the corner where everything had started 18 months earlier. It looks smaller than I remember, Lila said, studying the bench that had been her lowest point. Or maybe I'm just bigger now. You're definitely bigger, Maddie said seriously. Not like fat bigger, but like person bigger. Like you take up more space in a good way. That's very profound, Bug, Jacob said, impressed. Mrs. Rodriguez talks about it in class, about how some people make themselves small because they think that's safer, but actually we should all take up the space we deserve. Mrs. Rodriguez is wise, Lila said, crouching down to Maddie's level. And you're right. I was trying to be invisible that day, trying to take up no space at all. Then you saw me anyway. Because you're not invisible, Maddie said simply. Nobody's invisible if someone's actually looking. They took a photo there, the 4 of them, family of 3 plus dog, on the same corner where 2 had become 3 18 months ago. A marker, a memorial. A reminder of how quickly everything could change when someone chose to see instead of look away. That evening, Lila found an old notebook in her things, something she'd written in during those homeless months. She'd forgotten about it, pushed it to the back of a drawer when they'd moved her into the house, not ready to confront who she'd been then. But now, settled at the kitchen table while Jacob cooked dinner and Maddie played with Biscuit in the living room, she opened it to a random page. The entry was from 3 days before the bus stop, 3 days before everything changed. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she'd written in shaky handwriting. "I'm so tired. Tired of being cold, tired of being scared, tired of being invisible. Mom, if you can hear me wherever you are, I'm sorry. I tried to keep going, but I don't think I can anymore. I don't think there's anything left to keep going for." Lila read the words with tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from the vast distance between that woman and who she was now. That woman had been 3 days away from being saved by a little girl's hug, 3 days from meeting her future husband, 3 days from the beginning of everything good. And she hadn't known it, couldn't have known it. "What's that?" Jacob asked, noticing her tears, immediately concerned. "Something I wrote when I was homeless, 3 days before I met you." She showed him the page, let him read the desperation and hopelessness. His face went pale. "Lila, were you planning to—" "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe, eventually. I was so far down I couldn't see a way back up. And then Maddie hugged me and you bought me a donut and suddenly there was a reason to try one more day. And then another, and then another." Jacob pulled her into his arms, holding tight. "I can't imagine a world without you in it. Can't imagine our lives if Maddie hadn't stopped that day." But she did stop. That's what matters. She saw someone everyone else looked past, and she decided to do something about it. An 8-year-old taught me more about humanity in 5 minutes than I'd learned in 30 years. She's pretty special. She's amazing. You both are. That night, Lila took the notebook and a pen and wrote a new entry on a fresh page. "Dear Mom, it's been almost 2 years since you died. 2 years since my world fell apart. I wish you were here to see what I've built from those broken pieces. I wish you could meet Jacob and Maddie, could see our home, could know that I'm not just surviving anymore, but actually living. I'm married, Mom, to a good man who sees me completely and loves me anyway. I'm a stepmom to a girl who calls me Mama L and makes me laugh every single day. I have a job I love, a house I live in, a dog who follows me everywhere. I have a life again, a real life, not just existence. You always said that the darkest nights produce the brightest stars. I didn't believe you during those homeless months, during that endless winter of loss and fear. But you were right. You were right about so much. I miss you every day. But I'm okay now, more than okay. I'm happy, Mom. Finally, genuinely happy. I hope wherever you are, you can see that. I hope you know I made it through. Love always, your daughter." She closed the notebook and put it away, not to forget, but to remember. To have evidence of the journey, proof of how far she'd come, a reminder that the worst moments don't have to be the final ones. In September, they celebrated Maddie's 9th birthday with a party in the backyard. Friends and family gathered to watch her blow out candles and open presents and just be gloriously, messily 9 years old. Sarah came with David, bringing a gift Maddie immediately loved. Helen came with more pie. The neighbors came. Emma and her whole family came. The house and yard filled with people and noise and joy. "Make a wish, Bug," Jacob said as Maddie prepared to blow out the candles. She closed her eyes tight, thinking hard, then opened them and looked directly at Lila. "I don't need to wish. I already have everything I wanted." "You have to wish for something," Emma protested. "That's the rule." "Okay, fine." Maddie closed her eyes again. "I wish that everyone gets to be as happy as we are. That everyone finds their family like we found each other." She blew out the candles in one breath and everyone cheered, but Lila was crying again. The happy tears that had become so common this year. The overflow of a heart too full to contain everything without spillage. Later, after the party wound down and guests left and Maddie fell asleep exhausted and Sugar crashed on the couch, Jacob and Lila cleaned up the backyard while Biscuit supervised from his favorite spot under the tree. "We should talk about something," Lila said, gathering paper plates into a trash bag with the careful casualness of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation in her head. "Okay," Jacob said, immediately alert to her tone. What's up? I've been thinking about the future, about our family, about whether we want to expand it. Jacob stopped mid-cleanup. You mean another kid? Maybe, if you want that. I know we haven't really discussed it seriously, and I don't want to assume, but I also don't want to not talk about it if it's something we both might want. Do you want it? Jacob asked carefully. I think so. Not right now, but someday. I love Maddie so much, but there's a part of me that wonders what it would be like to experience pregnancy, to have a baby from the start, to give Maddie a sibling, but only if you want it too. I know you already have Maddie, and maybe that's enough for you, and that's completely okay. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, processing. I've been thinking about it too, he admitted. Wondering if you'd want kids, if it was fair to ask when you're still rebuilding, if having a biological child would somehow diminish what you have with Maddie. It wouldn't, Lila said firmly. Maddie is mine in every way that matters. Biology doesn't change that. But I'd like to experience becoming a mother from the beginning too, if that makes sense. Both things can be true. Then let's do it, Jacob said, surprising them both with the certainty in his voice. Not tomorrow, not next month, but soon. Let's plan for it, prepare for it, make it something we're actively choosing instead of just letting it happen or not happen. Really? Lila's face lit up with hope and excitement. Really? I love being a dad. I'd love to do it again with you. I'd love to give Maddie a sibling and see what kind of person we create together. They kissed there in the messy backyard, surrounded by birthday party debris and watched by a disinterested dog, planning a future that kept expanding in the best possible ways. The conversation with Maddie happened the next morning over pancakes, both of them nervous about her reaction. So, we have something we want to talk to you about, Jacob started carefully. You're getting another dog, Maddie said immediately, hopeful. No, we're not getting another dog. One is plenty. This is about potentially expanding our family in a different way. Maddie's eyes went wide. A baby? You're having a baby? Not yet, Lila clarified, but maybe someday in the next year or two. We wanted to see how you'd feel about that. Would it be my brother or sister? Brother or sister, yes. Half-sibling, technically, but that's just biology. They'd be your sibling in every real way. Maddie thought about this seriously, syrup dripping from her fork. Would you still have time for me? Would I still be important? You would always be important, Jacob said firmly. Always. A new baby doesn't replace you or diminish you. It adds to our family. But you're still you, still our Maddie, still essential. Would I have to share my room? Not unless you wanted to. We'd figure out space, maybe convert the studio apartment into a nursery eventually. Could I help take care of the baby, like feeding and playing and stuff? Absolutely, Lila said. You'd be the big sister. That's an important job. Okay, Maddie said finally. I think I'd like a little brother or sister, but I want to be involved in picking the name. I have opinions. I'm sure you do, Jacob said, trying not to laugh. We'll definitely consider your input. And the baby has to love Biscuit. That's non-negotiable. We'll make sure of it. The decision made, life continued its forward momentum. October brought Halloween. Maddie dressed as a witch, Biscuit reluctantly wearing a pumpkin costume, the whole family trick-or-treating through the neighborhood they now felt fully part of. November brought Thanksgiving at their house, Helen and Sarah and David all sitting at the same table, the blended family that had seemed impossible now feeling inevitable. December brought Christmas lights and traditions both old and new, Lila teaching Maddie her mother's cookie recipes, Jacob building a gingerbread house that collapsed spectacularly. In January, on the one-year anniversary of their engagement, Lila took a pregnancy test that came back positive. She told Jacob that evening after Maddie was asleep, showing him the test with shaking hands and barely contained joy. We're having a baby, she whispered. We're having a baby, he repeated, pulling her close, his hand already moving to her still flat stomach. Holy shit, we're having a baby! Language, she said automatically, but she was laughing and crying at the same time. They told Maddie the next morning, presenting it as the best kind of news, watching her process from confusion to understanding to excitement in the space of 30 seconds. I'm going to be a big sister, she shrieked, jumping up and down. When? How long? Is it a boy or girl? Have you picked names? Can I tell Emma? 9 months, we don't know yet. No names yet. And yes, you can tell Emma, Jacob answered in order. But remember, this is early. Sometimes pregnancies don't work out, so we're being cautiously optimistic. It'll work out, Maddie said, with the absolute certainty of 9-year-olds. I just know it will. The pregnancy was textbook normal, morning sickness that lasted exactly 12 weeks, food aversions that made cooking interesting, exhaustion that had Lila falling asleep at 8 p.m. Jacob was attentive to the point of being overbearing, Maddie was excited to the point of being exhausting, and Lila was grateful for all of it. In March, they found out they were having a boy. Maddie immediately started campaigning for names that ranged from reasonable to ridiculous. How about Oliver, she suggested, or Max, or Thunder. Thunder Reed sounds really cool. We're not naming him Thunder, Jacob said firmly. Why not? It's a strong name. He could be like a superhero. Let's start with traditional names and work our way toward superhero names if nothing else fits, Lila said diplomatically. They eventually settled on Ethan James Reed. Ethan because they both loved it, James after Lila's mother's maiden name. A connection to the past, a hope for the future, a name that felt right the moment they said it out loud. The pregnancy progressed through spring and into summer, Lila's belly growing, the baby's movements becoming visible from the outside. Maddie spending hours talking to her brother through Lila's stomach. I'm going to teach you everything, she told the bump seriously. How to play fetch with Biscuit, and which vegetables you can hide under your napkin, and how to get Daddy to say yes to things. I'm going to be the best big sister ever. You already are, Lila said, stroking Maddie's hair as she leaned against the bump. In August, on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks before Lila's due date, her water broke while they were eating dinner. There was a moment of pure chaos, Jacob panicking and grabbing the hospital bag, Maddie simultaneously excited and terrified, Biscuit sensing the energy and barking at everything, Lila trying to breathe through contractions while reminding Jacob where he'd put the car keys. Called it, Lila managed between contractions. I told you he'd come early. You're amazing, Jacob said, helping her to the car. Absolutely amazing. Ask me again in 6 hours when I'm screaming at you. They dropped Maddie at Sarah's house with strict instructions to call the moment anything happened, then drove to the hospital with Lila timing contractions and Jacob driving with exaggerated care. You can go the speed limit, Lila said. I'm not going to give birth in the car. We have time. I'm not risking it. You're doing 25 in a 45 zone. We'll get there faster if you speed up. I'm driving at a safe, responsible speed. You're driving like someone's grandmother. Move it, Reed. Despite the slow driving, they made it to the hospital with plenty of time. The labor was long, 14 hours of breathing and pushing and cursing and Jacob's hand being squeezed to the point of numbness. But at 4:37 a.m. on a Wednesday in August, Ethan James Reed entered the world with a cry that announced his displeasure at the whole birthing process. He's perfect, Lila sobbed, holding him for the first time, this tiny person she'd carried for 9 months. This physical manifestation of the family they'd built. He's absolutely perfect. He looks like you, Jacob said, tears streaming down his face. He has your nose. Poor kid, Lila joked weakly, exhausted but euphoric. They called Maddie at 5 a.m., knowing she wouldn't have slept anyway. She answered on the first ring. Is he here? Is my brother here? He's here, Jacob confirmed. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, full head of dark hair, and he's perfect. Can I come see him? Right now, please? Let's give Mama a few hours to rest and clean up, and then yes, you can come meet your brother. Maddie arrived at 9 a.m. with Sarah and David, carrying a stuffed giraffe that was nearly as big as Ethan. She approached the hospital bed with uncharacteristic caution, eyes wide with wonder. He's so small, she whispered. You were this small once, Jacob said. No way. I was never that tiny. Yes way. I have pictures to prove it. Lila held Ethan out carefully. Want to hold your brother? Maddie nodded, sitting in the chair beside the bed while Jacob helped position Ethan in her arms. She stared down at him with an expression of such fierce love and protection that it made everyone in the room emotional. Hi, Ethan, she said softly. I'm your big sister Maddie. I've been waiting for you for a really long time. I'm going to teach you everything and protect you from everything bad and make sure you're always happy. Welcome to our family." Ethan, who'd been sleeping, opened his eyes briefly, seeming to look directly at his sister. Maddie gasped. "He looked at me. Did you see that? He knows I'm his sister." "He definitely knows," Lila confirmed, wiping tears from her eyes again. Sarah took photos, capturing the moment. Maddie holding Ethan, Jacob, and Lila on either side, the family of 4 complete. Later, she'd send them the pictures with a message that said simply, "This is beautiful. You've built something beautiful." They came home 3 days later to find the house decorated with "Welcome Home Baby Ethan" signs that Maddie and Helen had made. Biscuit sniffed the new arrival cautiously, then seemed to accept him as part of the pack, taking up a position near the nursery door that he wouldn't abandon for the next several weeks. The newborn phase was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Sleepless nights and constant feedings, the smell of baby soap and diaper cream, the tiny sounds Ethan made that had them all running to check on him. Maddie was an enthusiastic helper, bringing diapers and bottles, singing to Ethan when he cried, being gentle and patient in ways that surprised everyone. "I thought she might be jealous," Jacob admitted one night as they took turns walking a fussy Ethan around the living room. "But she's been amazing." "She has enough love for everyone," Lila said. "That's her superpower." In September, on a Saturday morning that felt like any other Saturday morning except for how completely different everything was, they all went to the farmer's market together. Jacob carried Ethan in a baby sling, Lila held Maddie's hand, and they walked through the familiar stalls that had been such a significant part of their story. Maria saw them coming and started crying before they even reached her donut stand. "Look at you," she exclaimed. "Look at your beautiful family! I've been waiting to see the baby!" She came around the counter to peer at Ethan, cooing and making the faces that all people make at babies. "He's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And Maddie, look how big you've gotten. You're practically grown up." "I'm 9 3/4, Maddie said proudly, "and I'm the best big sister ever." "I don't doubt it for a second." Maria looked at Jacob and Lila with shining eyes. "I think about you two sometimes, you know. About that first morning when you bought her donuts. I could see something special happening even then. I told my husband that night, I said, 'Those 3 are going to be a family. Mark my words,' and I was right." "You were right," Lila agreed, bouncing Ethan gently as he started to fuss. "Thank you for being part of our story." "Oh, honey, I'm honored to be even a footnote. Now what can I get you? On the house today to celebrate your baby." They got their usual order, apple cider donuts, coffee just how they liked it, and found a bench in the autumn sunshine. Ethan nursed while Maddie ate her donut, and Jacob just sat there looking at his family with an expression of such contentment it made Lila's heart ache in the best way. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about that February morning 2 years ago, about how close we came to never having this. If I'd been running late, if we'd taken a different route, if Maddie hadn't let go of my hand at exactly that moment. But we weren't, and we didn't, and she did," Lila interrupted gently. "All the what-ifs in the world don't change what is. And what is pretty damn perfect." "Language," Maddie said automatically, grinning with sugar on her face. "Sorry, Bug, but it's true. This is exactly where we're supposed to be." They finished their donuts and walked through the market, greeting vendors who'd watched their story unfold week by week, introducing Ethan to the community that had been part of their foundation. The honey seller congratulated them. The flower vendor gave Maddie a free daisy. The man who sold handmade soaps gave them a baby-safe lavender bar as a gift. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once, this Saturday morning ritual that had started from a place of desperation and transformed into something full of joy. That afternoon, after Ethan was down for a nap and Maddie was at Emma's house, Jacob found Lila on the back porch, with that old notebook open in her lap again. She'd been writing something, her hand moving steadily across the page. "Another entry for your mom?" he asked, settling beside her. "Sort of. And for me. And for Ethan someday, when he's old enough to understand." She showed him what she'd written. "Dear Ethan, you won't remember this day. You're only 6 weeks old and your main concerns are eating and sleeping and occasionally being mad about gas. But today we went to the farmer's market as a family, all 4 of us, and I want you to know about the place where your family really began. It's a corner near the market, a bus stop bench where I was sitting 2.5 years ago at the absolute lowest point of my life. I was homeless, broke, grieving, and ready to give up. Then your sister, who wasn't your sister yet but would become your sister through the strange magic of choice and love, walked up to me and asked if she could give me a hug. That hug saved my life, Ethan. Literally saved it. It connected me to your dad, who took an insane risk on a stranger with nothing. It gave me a home, a job, a family, a purpose. It led to everything good that came after: the wedding, the stability, you. So when you're older and you ask about how Mama Elle and Daddy met, this is the story. It's weird and improbable and kind of unbelievable, but it's true. It's our story. And you're the newest chapter in it, the proof that broken people can heal and build beautiful things from their brokenness. Welcome to the family, baby boy. We've been waiting for you. Jacob was crying by the time she finished reading. That's beautiful. You should keep writing these, a journal for each kid. I plan to. I want them to know the whole story, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts, because the hard parts make the good parts matter more. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching Biscuit chase squirrels in the yard, listening to Ethan's small sounds through the baby monitor, existing in the perfect ordinariness of a Saturday afternoon. The years that followed were full of the normal chaos of raising a family. Ethan grew from baby to toddler to small boy, walking and talking and developing a personality that was part Jacob's stubbornness and part Lila's thoughtfulness. Maddie navigated middle school and high school with the same compassion that had defined her since childhood, becoming someone who instinctively reached out to the overlooked and lonely. Biscuit got older and slower but remained devoted to his people, especially to Ethan, who'd learned to walk by pulling himself up on the patient dog's fur. Jacob's business continued to thrive, eventually growing enough that he hired employees and could take actual vacations. Lila became head librarian, implementing programs for homeless patrons that provided resources and dignity, remembering viscerally what it felt like to need both. Sarah and David got married in a small ceremony that Maddie served as a bridesmaid for, the blended family becoming so blended the lines between households blurred into comfortable cooperation. On the 5-year anniversary of the wedding, they went back to that bus stop bench one more time, the whole family including 4-year-old Ethan, who didn't really understand why they were standing on a random street corner. "This is where Mama Elle and I met," Jacob explained, holding his son. "Where our family really started." "Here?" Ethan looked around skeptically at the unremarkable bus stop. "Why here?" "Because Mama Elle needed help and Daddy helped her," Maddie explained, 14 now and already taller than Lila. "Because sometimes the most important moments happen in the most ordinary places." "Oh." Ethan accepted this with the easy logic of 4-year-olds. "Can we go get donuts now?" They laughed and headed to the farmer's market, 5 years of tradition continuing, Maria still manning her stand and still crying happy tears every time she saw them. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Jacob and Lila stood in the kitchen where so much of their life together had unfolded. 5 years married, nearly 7 years since that first morning. The house showed evidence of their family everywhere. Maddie's artwork on the fridge, Ethan's toys scattered across the living room, Biscuit's bed in the corner, family photos covering every available surface. "Do you ever think about what your life would be like if we hadn't met that day?" Jacob asked, pulling Lila into his arms. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not in a wistful way anymore. More in a grateful way. I think about all the parallel universes where that morning went differently, where Maddie didn't stop, where you didn't take a chance, where I didn't show up at the library. And then I think about how lucky I am to be in this universe, the one where everything aligned just right. I'm the lucky one. We're both lucky, and we both made choices that turned luck into something real. You chose to see me. I chose to trust you. We both chose, every day, to keep building this. Best choices I ever made." "Same," Lila kissed him softly. "Every single day, same." Years continued to pass in that strange way they do, slowly when you're living them, and quickly when you look back. Maddie graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to college, where she studied social work with a focus on homelessness, inspired by the woman who'd raised her and the morning that had changed everything. Ethan started elementary school with the same intuitive kindness his sister had always possessed, befriending the lonely kids, sharing his lunch, being the person people could count on. Biscuit eventually passed away peacefully in his sleep at the grand old age of 15, surrounded by his family, having been loved and safe every day of his life with them. They got another dog, two actually, because Ethan convinced them that dogs got lonely alone. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays. They fought occasionally and made up always. They struggled sometimes and thrived mostly. They were normal and extraordinary and imperfect and exactly right. On the 10th anniversary of that February morning, they commissioned a plaque for the bus stop bench. It was small, discreet, but permanent. It read simply, "Here, a hug changed everything, February 2025. The city approved it as part of a public art initiative, not knowing the full story but sensing its importance. It became a minor landmark, a curiosity for people waiting for the 47 bus, a reminder that significant moments can happen anywhere if someone's paying attention. 20 years after that first morning, Maddie brought her own family to visit, her husband and her two kids, twins who had their grandmother's eyes and their mother's compassionate heart. She showed them the bench, told them the story of how Grandma Lila and Grandpa Jacob had met, how a hug from a 7-year-old had built a family. "You really just walked up to a stranger and hugged her?" one of the twins asked, skeptical. "I really did," Maddie confirmed, "because she looked sad and I thought she needed it. Turned out I was right." What if she'd been dangerous? What if it had been a bad idea? Then Grandpa would have pulled me away. But she wasn't dangerous, she was just lost. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out to someone who's lost and help them find their way home. The twins absorbed this wisdom from their mother, already learning the lessons that had defined 3 generations of their family. See people, choose kindness, build families from choice as much as from blood. That evening, the whole family gathered at the house that had been home for over 2 decades. Jacob and Lila, Maddie and her family, Ethan and his girlfriend, Sarah and David, who'd been divorced and remarried to each other in a twist no one saw coming, Helen, who was 90 but still sharp and still bringing pie. They filled the space with noise and laughter and arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes. After dinner, after the chaos settled into comfortable conversation, Lila found herself standing at the kitchen window looking out at the backyard where her children had grown up, where her grandchildren were now playing, where life had happened in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Jacob came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. They were both older now, gray hair, reading glasses, the aches and pains of time passing, but they were still them. Still the man who'd bought a stranger breakfast and the woman who'd accepted help from a child. "Happy?" he asked. "Absurdly happy," Lila confirmed. "Impossibly, ridiculously, gratefully happy." "Good. Me too." They stood together watching their family, watching the life they'd built from the most improbable beginning, watching love multiply and expand and continue forward into generations they'd never meet, but would influence through the story they'd started. Outside, the February evening was cold but clear, stars visible in the darkness. Somewhere across the city, on a bench near a bus stop, a small plaque marked the place where 3 lives had collided and transformed, where a little girl's compassion had saved a woman's life, where a father's courage had created a family, where choice had proven stronger than circumstance. And in this warm kitchen, in this full house, 2 people who'd found each other at their most broken were standing together in their wholeness, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple forward forever, changing not just individual lives but entire futures. "Thank you," Lila whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me, for choosing me, for building this with me." "Thank you for letting me," Jacob replied, "for trusting me, for staying, for making my life infinitely better than I ever imagined it could be." From the living room, Maddie's voice called out, "Whoever's hiding in the kitchen, we're starting the movie. Get in here." They smiled at each other, these 2 people who'd been strangers on a bus stop bench and were now grandfather and grandmother, husband and wife, best friends and partners, and everything in between. Hand in hand, they walked back to join their family, back to the noise and warmth and beautiful chaos of the life they'd built. 1 hug, 2 decades ago. 1 choice to see instead of look away. One small moment that changed absolutely everything. And now, thousands of moments later, still changing, still growing, still rippling forward into a future built on the foundation of a little girl's compassion and two broken people's courage to heal together. This was their story, messy and improbable and absolutely real. This was their family, chosen and loved and permanent. This was their life, built from nothing, grown into everything, and still expanding with each new day, each new choice, each new hug offered to someone who needed it. The end was really just another beginning, the way the best endings always are.